Not yet. I don't know if it's playing.
Okay, it's 5:45. At this time, I'd like to start the meeting, the organizational meeting of Valley View School District, and I'd like to start with the oath of office for the new members, please.
Miss up front. No, go ahead.
Okay, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Valley View Local School District, Montgomery County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do. I did. Roll call, please.
Mr. DeGroat?
Here.
Mrs. Iser?
Here.
Mr. Rudd?
Here.
Mr. Skidmore?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the meeting for choosing president and vice president. Is there any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Tim Rudd for president.
Any others? Any discussion? Any others? I'd like to nominate Ms. Smith for president.
I'll second that.
Okay, two motions, so.
Can I decline the president position?
You can.
All right. Oh, then we only have one on the floor, so let's take a vote.
Roll call. Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Okay, let the record reflect that you are president, and now you can take over the meeting.
Thanks. second order of business on our agenda is the election of vice president. Do we have any nominations for the position of vice president?
I nominate Ms. Smith.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any other nominations? Discussion? All right, a roll call for Ms. Smith as vice president.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Next item on the agenda, item 4B, is to set the time, place for regular meetings and dates for the Board of Education going into 2022.
I move that we keep them the same.
I second.
So that's, for the record, that's the second Monday of every month here at the high school in the choir room at 6 p.m.
Any discussion?
Really quickly bring up, do we want to leave it in here? I just want to bring up with possible audiences, with COVID kind of going around, we may want to explore having a slightly larger space. I'm just pointing that out. It's something that if we want to leave it in here, we can, that's fine. Like, I appreciate Maddox and Sophia being kind and gracious to sit over there today because we need to spread out. If we go to a different space, we might be more all together and allow for more people. I'm just throwing that out as a possibility.
Take it back to the lunchroom.
We could go back to the assuming that the cafeteria is the high school cafeteria or the intermediate cafeteria is free on those days. Usually it is. I'm just, something to bring up. It's up to the board to decide.
I don't have any objection to that.
So should we set the intermediate, or do you prefer the cafeteria here?
Cafeteria here is bigger, and so therefore it would allow us to
Okay.
spread out and have more people than
Okay.
the intermediate one. And I'm not sure of the procedure here. Could we say that it would be in the cafeteria unless the cafeteria was already being used for a purpose, and in which case then we would revert back to this room? Just to be able to have some sort of standing order, so we're not flip-flopping back and forth always.
Sure. Just one point in the discussion, there was an issue about whether or not we might want at some point to include a work session and alter the time. I don't know that today's the right day to do that, but that would be something we might want to think about in the future. But, is there a motion to set the date as the second Monday of the month in the cafeteria unless it's not available?
Yeah, we have a motion in a second.
Call roll?
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Item number 5, setting the bond for the treasurer in the amount of $50,000.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Other than to note that that's what we've done every time, forever.
Yeah, and it's set in policy, it's in our policy as well.
Right, call roll?
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 6, resolution adopting treasurer's standing authorization calendar year 2022. Roman numeral 6.1, request for advance draw on taxes. Treasurer hereby authorized by the Board of Education to request advance payment of taxes collected as funds are available in accordance with section 321.34 of the Ohio Revised Code. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 6.2, appropriation modifications. The treasurer is hereby authorized to make appropriation modifications between fund accounts with these modifications being reported to the board. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 6.3, payment to bills. The treasurer is authorized to pay all bills within the limit of the appropriation resolution as bills are received and when merchandise has been certified as received in good condition by the superintendent or his designee. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Roman numeral 7, resolution adopting superintendent's standing authorization for calendar year 2022. Roman numeral 7.1, resolution naming superintendent as purchasing agent for 2022. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 7.2, resolution authorizing superintendent to accept resignations. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 7.3, resolution authorizing superintendent to hire staff between board meetings. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 7.4, superintendent as designee for student disciplinary suspensions. In accordance with Ohio Revised Code, section 3313.66D and policy 5611, the board hereby appoints the superintendent as its designee for purposes of hearing and deciding appeals of student disciplinary suspensions. Be it further resolved that the decision of the superintendent may be appealed under chapter 2506 of the revised code. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Item number 8, approval of legal firms. The following firms are approved to handle legal activities on behalf of the Board of Education. Usage is at the discretion, or rather the direction of the board, superintendent, or treasurer. The enumerated firms are Roman numeral 8.1, Bricker and Eckler, Roman numeral 8.2, Ennis Britton, and Roman numeral 8.3, Frost Brown Todd. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion. I do have a question about that. And actually I have two questions. One, is this listing of firms in any order of priority, or is this just simply the firms that were?
These are the firms that we are permitted to then use.
Okay.
So if there's another firm that we'd like to use, we should add it at this time.
Correct, and that was my second point of discussion. The Subashi, Wildermuth, and Justice Firm, and they're over in Bellbrook. They have, do excellent work. They come highly recommended. I think it'd be a good idea to put them on the firm, or on the list. And the primary reason is that they're a smaller firm. That doesn't always mean that you're going to have lower rates, but it usually does mean that you're going to have fewer bodies thrown into the issue, and so you'll have lower bills. And so we might want to have that option to go that route.
So moved. That's amended. And the fourth option.
Second.
Any discussion? Call roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser? Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 9, recommend the board approve the annual membership to Ohio School Board Association, OSBA, for 2021, is that it?
Should be 2022, yes.
For 2022, we have a motion,
So moved.
we have a second,
Second.
any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 10 calls for appointments. First, for representative to MVECA. Do we have a nomination for representatives of the board to MVECA?
These are just volunteers.
Do we have a volunteer?
We don't, it's not,
Now for a friendly amendment, might it be helpful for me to explain what this person might do?
Oh, absolutely.
Just, it would only be about 2 meetings a year.
Okay.
Rebecca is our A site that we use for technology, purchasing on some certain things. It used to be when it was in person, they had a really good lunch, so I could try to sell you on that. But it's about 2 meetings a year. And it's what we do with technology. Mr. Pugh uses it for some purchasing sometimes to help with pricing. So it's a consortium it's a consortium that we belong to. Didn't know if that helps anybody, makes it more enticing or less enticing, but that way you at least know what you're kind of getting yourself into.
So any volunteers? And can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Have we in the past had vacancies in that position? And does it hurt the district if you don't have?
It doesn't hurt the district. They always ask us if we do want to have a board member, and so this pro forma, I think it's safe to say we haven't had strong attendance at that historically. So, but it's obviously the board's prerogative. They ask for a board member and we can provide one.
The next position is for legislative liaison to OSBA. Do we have any volunteers for that?
I'm happy to continue in that role unless somebody else would like the opportunity.
I would like the opportunity.
Okay, it's all yours.
Thank you. All right, do we need to vote on that, or is that just?
No.
All right, great. Third position, rather, delegate or alternate, delegate and alternate for OSBA Capital Conference. Do we have a volunteer for that?
I would be willing to do that.
As the delegate or as the alternate?
If someone really wants to be the delegate, they can, but I would do that.
We have a volunteer for alternate. OSBA Conference, that's 3 work days
Yes.
in November.
Two.
Well, 2 work days. It's a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
3 conference.
Yeah.
Do we have a volunteer for alternate?
I'll be an alternate.
All right, that takes us to the end of our list. Yes.
If I can interject, do we have a student achievement liaison for OSBA? That was something that they had mentioned that they would be looking for in each school.
So
Student achievement.
they typically ask for us to submit anything for like student work. Like a few years ago, our STEM club went there. I didn't know that there was a liaison. That's new to me, but in the past, they've asked if we have anything we want to present there, and sometimes we're selected and sometimes we're not. So I can check about a liaison, but I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, the way that was presented, we were at a conference, but
Yeah.
the way that was presented is that, they were looking for, is there someone from the board to liaise?
Oh, okay.
With them and that. So
Okay.
that would be something to look into
Yeah.
further.
Yeah.
But put that on the agenda for
Yeah.
the next meeting. Sure. All right, someone like to move that we adjourn the special organizational meeting? Do we have a second?
Second.
Call roll?
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore? Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
All right, well, we are 1 minute past time to start our regular meeting. If you do intend to participate in the public participation portion, there is a form that you'll need to fill out. And so if anybody would like to do that, please be sure to do this and do that. It's up here behind us, and get that to me as soon as you can, if you want to. Otherwise, we can call the regular meeting to order.
Mr. Rudd, do you want to take a couple minutes to get those forms, because that's right away on the agenda?
Sure. I mean, if you all don't mind waiting, you want to take like a 3-minute recess?
Yeah.
Give people time to grab a form?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Perfect.
Does that work?
Yeah. Then we will call the meeting. Meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting school district's business. Is not to be considered a public community meeting. There will be a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda, item 3. So you'll have time to do that. One thing that I will let you know, that is not an interactive time, so if you don't get a response from here, then please don't take that as a slight. That's your time to talk. And hopefully over the course of the evening or the time following this, you'll get your questions answered. And so I think we can call roll.
Mr. DeGrove?
Here.
Mrs. Iser?
Here.
Mr. Rudd?
Here.
Mr. Skidmore?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Sorry, Mrs. Smith. I was thinking of Mr. Cradable
Here.
and Ms. DeVille.
Item number 2 on our agenda is let's all stand together for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3 on our agenda, recognition of visitors and communications. Subset A, board appreciation recognition.
The OSBA is in the process of sending us little certificates for everybody. And I know for 3 of you, this is brand new to you being on the board, but January, oddly enough, is Board Appreciation Month.
Nice.
Yeah, they didn't give you any time to be able to appreciate you. But I will say, and I think I can say that I know one of you a little bit better than the others, but people that are on the board, and I think the new people would agree to this, you don't go onto the board because of the lofty dollars that you receive for doing this. It is public service at its most intimate form. John Dewey used to state that the purpose of education was to promulgate democracy, and I think that's most done at the local level through school boards. And so I appreciate all the people that ever want to volunteer to be on the school board. It's a thankless job, but I very much appreciate you, and I would hope that everybody can join me in just a little round of applause to thank you for volunteering to be members of this community. And the certificates are in the mail, so they will be here shortly.
Roman numeral, I'm in the process of misplacing my agenda. Roman numeral B, public participation. All right, we've got 3 folks here. I'm going to call you up at random. I'm going to look for Lucy Gilbert. Ms. Gilbert?
Yeah, I'm just coming back with the same questions that I had in the December meeting, which I did not receive answers to. First one in December was when and why and by whom was the location changed from west of the building out here behind the baseball and softball fields, now south of the former Phillips house. word tech lab is gonna be shared with something else. Well, shared with what? And when you look at the schematic design on the website, it's 1,163 square feet. So how does that happen? How do you have 1,163 square feet of shared space? I mean, that's small for industrial tech anyway. All that equipment going in there. I assume that the way these state projects go, the current equipment that we have, well, sorry, down there, cannot go to the new buildings. We're going to turn around and buy everything again, I assume. But it takes up quite a lot of space, of course, with all that equipment in there. So is it really going to happen? Are we going to have industrial tech? Is there going to be a program? But I hear the back and forth of, oh, we're going to be here, kids are going to walk here from the new building, go to industrial tech, and now there is industrial tech. Which is it? Because what I see is we already have a retire and rehire situation with our current instructor. So what I see is when that gentleman decides to retire for good, we're going to scrap the program. And what I said at the last meeting was, by planning my 8th graders 4 years coming up in high school, I had spread out those 5 classes. Well, now, not really believing what's going on, if you're staying on schedule and going to be in the new building by his junior year, I've now reverted to cramming all 5 of those classes into 4 semesters, freshman and sophomore, because I don't think it's really going to be there. So, and my worry is why? Because that is pre-engineering type stuff. If you're really planning for, the future facility and all of this, that is, like I said before, hands-on, real learning. That is your Pythagorean theorem of math getting put to use. That's your unit conversions getting put to use. That is problem solving. That is what all these current seniors got shuffled around with their 4th grade year with project-based learning that never really happened. This is project-based. There we go.
Thank you.
So I would like to actually have answers before the next evening, or I'll have to come and say it again. Thank you.
We did have some additional copies of the agenda, so if you don't have one and would like one, looks like Mr. Kazare would be glad to get one to you.
Yeah, I will.
All right, thanks. Next in our stack here is Joni Sears.
I have lived in the Valley View District since 1978, while being blessed to work 30 years for the district. I also want to reiterate, I've worked here 30 years and spoke 3 times. But all 3 times have been within the last 5 years. I have already spoken some of the following words at the prior board meeting. Sadly, no one had heeded my message. As Leopold stated, there are over 400,000 words in the English language, with the most important being choice. Where we stand today is because of the choices that have been made. The saddest part of that is they are not the choices of the Valley View community. They were actually given no choice in these decisions, even though they are the ones that actually pay the bill. Another statement I made was, you can build new walls, but you cannot rebuild what the district was built on, the people. We are small town America, and we are proud of it. You cannot force a square peg in a round hole. Apparently, no one listened, because look at where we are, still trying to force a square peg in a round hole. Now, look at where we are today. Are we in a better place? Have we made any strides in the right direction? Do we value people who live and work in this community more? I am an optimist, but I am also a realist. As of today, Monday, January 10th, We have made a few strides in the right direction. We swore in 3 new board members, and for this, I sincerely thank you. My biggest hope is that they understand the enormous job they have signed on for and can bear the weight. They need to come to an understanding that the Board of Education is the superintendent's boss. He is not their boss. The board is to represent the concerns of the citizens, taxpayers, and parents to the school administrators, and to represent the needs of the students and school district to the citizens, taxpayers, and parents of the community. The school board sets the policies, goals, and objectives for the district, and it holds the superintendent responsible for implementing the policies and achieving the goals. We have either been ignoring or missing this information in the majority of the decisions made over the past several years. In closing, I would like to ask all of you in attendance, is it possible to care too much or not to care at all? It is time to get the care factor back into this district while making decisions that impact all of us and our students. As Aaron Tippin says in his song, you've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. You've got to be your own man and not a puppet on a string. Never compromise what's right and uphold your family name. You've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. As I see it, there is only one of 2 ways to go, the right way or the wrong way. We have chosen the wrong way too long. Once again, I thank the new board members for taking on this task. Let's stop walking on jello and get some solid footing. As Mr. Rex said at the last board meeting, that ship has already sailed, but that does not mean it has to sail in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Jamie Cordell.
I just wanted to speak a little bit on a couple different things with the layouts of the new buildings. And kind of a sidebar with the wrestling included with that. I understand you wanting to put the wrestling room in the old high school, and you wanting to put it in the cafeteria there in itself. The only problem with that is I feel like it'll really hurt the program overall. I mean, you're in the coldest months of the year, and you're asking kids to walk from building to building outside, and who knows what kind of weather conditions. Granted, I know you could have busing, but that's extra money that's probably not necessary if you actually included the wrestling in the new building. I understand that you guys are not doing the cafeteria or cafetorium, I think that's how you say it. In the old plans with that being there, you had sectioned off a part of your stage. It's 1,243 square feet. If you were actually not going to do the stage and you're actually going to do the auditorium in the old high school gym, could the wrestling not use that 1,243 square feet? I mean, make it a multi-purpose room. I don't care who uses it, fall, spring, summer. But it would be a great area to have a multi-purpose room. So that way the wrestling will still be a part of the new building. We can still use the new gyms for our tournaments. We just have to have an area to store our mats. I know Miller was here last meeting and he spoke. And I know DeGroat, you asked how much square feet he would need for practice areas. Their practice mats can either be an 8x8 or a 10x10. So even at the most 10x10, you're talking about 1,000 square feet for 10 mats, which would probably be more than what they would actually need. And you could use that other half of that space for storage of any sort. So I just would like that maybe you guys would consider that idea. And maybe save the money that you would spend on a wrestling room at the old school. I know the preschool is planning on being in the old school. I think that cafeteria in the courtroom right there would be a great space for them to have playground equipment, indoor or outdoor. I think that's a great space for that. currently on the plans, you guys have that, grade, I think it said pre-K and first grade playground is actually at the new building and not at where the preschool would actually be. And I don't think you wanna walk preschoolers from building to building, so I just thought that would be great, maybe an idea that you guys could maybe consider. Speaking of the auditorium, I think it would honestly be a great idea for the old gym, the old high school gym, to be turned into an actual auditorium. A great example of one that has kind of stood the test of time, if you've ever been to Lebanon City Schools, their old high school, which was built in 1969, so 52 years ago, that auditorium was built. It is outstanding, and it is still continued to use today. And as you know, if you know anything about Lebanon City Schools, their district has been building new buildings and new schools for years now. The one thing that they have always kept has been that auditorium. Even after they demolished the other half of that building, they kept that auditorium. And not only does the schools use it, but the community uses it as well. So maybe just something to consider. With that being said, to kind of come back to the wrestling a little bit, just to understand how big this program is getting. I don't know if anybody was here this weekend, you would have seen a great turnout, not only for the high school tournament, but also for the youth program. The quarters have now had it for four years, I believe now. They started with 15 athletes in 2018. They doubled their numbers to the next year to 26 kids. The year after that, during a pandemic, they doubled those numbers again to 48 kids. This year, they have 58 kids that are signed up in the youth program. And the porters they're going to be sticking with it. I'm even stepping in and going to be helping co-direct that with her, because we also have kids that are in junior high school kids. So that whole program is actually feeding into itself too. The youth program has been donating money, any excess funds that they have generated through tournaments that they're able to host, or even sponsorships. They actually donate that money back into the junior high and high school programs. And I don't think there's many youth programs that you can say that about in this community that do that. So I would really just like to see the wrestling program, just like the basketball, stay with the new building. And then if that means we have to share a room, or if that means we have to roll out mats in the new building and the cafeteria, like we used to do here, as long as we have a space to store mats, I think the wrestling program should be with the new building to be able to, an example of a school that didn't include a space for wrestling was our neighbors, New Lebanon. Dixie used to have an excellent wrestling program. They used to have huge numbers in youth, huge numbers in high school. They no longer do. Their new buildings didn't include them. So they're a program that got left to the side, and it now shows today with their numbers. And I would just need to see that happen with ours, especially like the growth becoming so big with where it's at. So that's all I had. Hope you consider some of the thoughts and ideas, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Drew Smith.
I'll keep mine short. It's been an ongoing thing, but I'm addressing everyone tonight concerning the future of our Spartan football program. It was brought to my attention our current coach is out interviewing for jobs. That, to me, doesn't seem like he has 2 feet in and best foot forward. He interviewed at Lebanon and didn't get it. He also is, I've heard he's interviewing other places. I don't have 100% confirmation on that. I'm sure some of you know, but some of the community probably doesn't know that. Secondly, I've got a quick little 5-point on that as well that kind of goes along. Our boys didn't receive scouting reports on Mondays for the team we're playing on Friday. So that's a thing we've done since before I was alive. And having the scouting reports is crucial to prepare for the team you play that week. That was not happening. That's one little issue. We were outscored 69-7 the last 4 games in the second halves. So after halftime, for people that don't know that haven't played football, you make adjustments at halftime to what the team is doing that you're playing. We were typically winning at halftime. We came out and got our butts kicked 69-7 the last 4 games. Then anytime a kid asks a question, the answer is, well, I played in the NFL. That's his answer. I played in the NFL. That's not an answer. That's not how you teach kids. So that's another issue. As far as that goes, he didn't bring a solid staff in. That speaks volume to the coach you are. When you come, any coach comes to a new place, you bring a solid staff. There was many times in practice the kids didn't even have position coaches. He was begging people to coach off the street. We just didn't have the people to help. I just can't figure that out. So that's an issue. Lastly, and most importantly, was disturbing to me that at one point after a practice, he had the kids sitting down and he thanked them for treating Coach Mike so good. He said, I know people in this community aren't welcoming to African Americans. And I took that personally, and I think everybody should, because I think we all treat people well here, and that's completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. And even if he had that notion coming here, he should know after coaching these boys that that's not how we raise them. That's not how we treat people. And that to me is just basically saying that we're a racist community is how he took it coming here. So that's pretty much all I have. I just wanted to keep it short, so I think that a change needs to be made. I was on the hiring committee, and I can admit when I was wrong. He interviewed well. I really like him. I thought he was a nice guy, but after hearing that from the boys, and that came straight from the boys at practice, you don't say that to kids. Maybe you say, well, you know, I'm really proud of you boys because you're all great people, and I might not have had that notion going in, but you guys have done really well. And it kind of reminds me of my wife's uncle, who's the head coach at Trotwood Madison. He's the only Caucasian person in that school district. He's coached there for 10 years. I couldn't imagine him sitting his team down and saying, thank you for being nice to me. That's just not acceptable. And that's what happened here. And that's wrong, and something needs to be done about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. Roman numeral 4, approval of minutes, regular meeting of December 9, 2021, and the work session of December 9, 2021, which is attachment number 1 in your board packets. We had a chance to review that. We have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 5, building project. Discussion of building project.
So I left it pretty open-ended. We were originally hoping to have a kind of a work session earlier, but due to schedules, it just didn't work. And that's what's happening in today's day and age right now. But I do have representatives from Fanning Howie and from Concord, to be able to answer some questions. One of the things that I think maybe they could help, if you don't mind, and I want to be able to turn it over to the board, I think there's some questions the board has. Sure. But one of the things that I keep hearing, and maybe they can, Steve, I'm going to kind of look to you to better help with. If I could share something that I think we've tried to communicate, but I don't think it's resonating. I think there's a belief that if we would have just left this building for 6 through 8, that we would have all of this extra LFI money, that we could do things like the wrestling room, and we'd have this money that we could do some of those things with. And when the board, I think in February or March last year, about a year ago, had the information in front of us, that's not the case. And so Steve, maybe if you can try to help frame that, because I think it's weird and I can understand this, I think it's difficult for some people to go, how is it that we're doing this, and it's a better deal financially, but I know what some people, what I hear is they're going, but we have less wiggle room than what we thought we were gonna have. if we would have just stayed with the original project, maybe Steve, this is where it started. If we would have stayed with the original scope, if you can talk about what would have happened with the wiggle room that we had planned, maybe
Yeah.
that might be a good start.
Yeah, I can do that. Just to kind of give an overview, the original project master plan was established in 2019. And so that was from OFCC, Ohio Facility Construction Commission, a master plan from 2019. They reset the cost per square foot on an annual basis. And they do their best to try to anticipate and adjust for inflation. So at that point in time, we were in what was called the Expedited Local Partnership Program, which meant that you would fund the project entirely up front with local dollars, with the promise of being compensated for the share from the state at an undetermined future date. That project at $2019 was, by the time you actually got to the point of going on the ballot, that master plan was about a year old. So those costs were about a year old. And then even more time went by. It was December of, what would it be, December of 20, that the commission said, Valley View, you could now be eligible for the funding now. And if you went and did the funding now, we would reestablish your project agreement with the current costs, the 2020 costs. Those were about $40 per square foot more than the previous. So what that did is it really escalated the cost of the project that the state would co-fund up to the dollar value at the time. And again, had you proceeded with the expedited project at $2019, unfortunately, the state would not have paid for any of that cost escalation. So that cost escalation of about $40 per square foot, let's call it roughly 150,000 square feet, is about $6 million that Valley View would have had to pay 100% of if you had gone forward. They would have not co-funded any of that. So in essence, what you were able to do then was take full advantage of the current values and the current offerings from the state rather than the previous one, and then have, in essence, having to pay all of your LFI money towards the cost escalation. So economically, it actually worked out to be a good economic decision.
I love Steve. Do people actually understand that? I'm just looking around, because it's a whole bunch of numbers, and what I found in having a conversation with people, Steve, can I say it a different way? We actually got more building for less money.
Yes, in simple terms.
And so I think, I just want to try to go brass tacks with it, because I don't want anybody to think we're just speaking in kind of fancy terminology, is I think the conversation, and I've got two people that were on the board, and I'm not speaking for you guys can speak for yourselves, but I think the issue that we faced was recognizing that we weren't going to have this LFI money that we thought we were going to have, that almost all of that was going to be taken up by inflation costs. But if we adopted the new plan, the state was willing to adjust the cost inflation, and by the state adjusting it, now that's us saying the state is now paying for some of that inflationary cost. Am I saying this, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong?
The inflation cost was $40 a square foot.
And so I just think there's a disconnect still, and we've tried to communicate it, and I just want to maybe flush that out a little bit here, because I think when I've had some conversations with some people, there's just a misunderstanding still, and we need to figure out, and that'll fall on me on how to better communicate that. But I just think there's a gap there with what we've done versus what a portion of our community thinks. And so just trying to make sure we start here to bridge that gap with with the experts here, so you can ask them, not just have it come from me. Robbie, if you want to chime in on that, that's up to you, but.
No, I mean, Steve said all of it. I do know with all the projects that I've touched and all the times working with OFCC, whether it's ELP or whether it's CFAP. So before you were ELP, now you're CFAP. The manual's the manual, their cost set's the cost set, and they don't pay escalation. If there's price increase, and let's face it, we live in a new norm of the world, and anybody that tries to buy any products, the costs are through the roof. And right out of the gate, they say, no, we're not doing it. So at the end of the day, by switching and going with the new cost set, you gotta pay, you're not just throwing it away at 300% steel increases, which is factual, or lumber that anybody that goes and buys is gonna see is just blown through the roof, starting to come down, but not all the way back in. They just wouldn't touch it. I mean, this covers all of that. So it was a good, just escalation alone, that's a good decision.
So it's fair to say that the things that, the extras that the community is kind of wanting to see. So basically what I'm hearing is that whether we go through whether we went the K-12 route, and we can't change course now, I understand that, or we went the, K-8 or K-6, 9-12 route, we would have had to, that was never gonna happen without borrowing. any
Correct.
time.
Now, we didn't know that up front. When we were on the ballot, we didn't know that. That wasn't something known. And so, Steve, just to kind of go back, so we go on the ballot. When we go on the ballot, it's a guess, how much we think we're gonna need. It's an educated guess, and the reality is, it's actually better for the district. One point that I wish we could just make over and over, and we'll keep making, is that we anticipated interest rates coming in at a certain level. We've actually come in under those interest rates, so I'll let Laura yell at me later. But if the auditor does their job, I think it's the auditor's office that does it, we should, all the taxpayers here, including myself, we should all get a tax break next year, because our interest rates are better. We cannot collect more than we told the voters we were gonna collect. If the rates are better and the project doesn't cost us much because of interest rates, that represents a direct savings for the taxpayers. So Mr. Rudd, you're 100% correct. I think there was a lot of hope, and I'll be honest, I had that hope as well, that we were gonna get to do some of these, I call them nice-to-have things that we'd really like to have. Looking back upon it with the numbers that we have, all of that money was gonna be taken up by inflationary cost. And so, no, I think you're 100% right on that. But I just wanted to make certain, that was the only thing I really wanted to bring up, but really, Board, I know you guys will have some questions for Fanning and Howie or Conger. That was just one thing I wanted to kind of frame at the beginning, because I still think there's a disconnect from what the reality of what happened versus what people think could have happened. And I understand that, and so that'll be on me, and I'll probably involve Mrs. Lucas to figure out how we can better communicate that out. Because I don't, we've delivered that message, but it's just not resonating, so we need to do something there.
Do you have an analysis? I mean, where's the cost breakdown?
We've given
Of
that.
the savings, like, is that out there somewhere that the public can get a hold of it?
Yeah, we've published that previously, but we could redo that again.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think sometimes the messaging that the companies deliver goes a long way.
Yeah.
Any more discussion on building project issues?
I have a question. When it went from CPAC to ELF, and with ELF, we gained 2% with the state. So for Laura or Valerie, what would that 2% gain in the project that would lessen our local obligation? Because it got voted in 2020 under the understanding it was gonna be CPAC. So
Correct.
that goes by 2019 equity rating, when we knew we were having a reevaluation in the county for 2020, which then put us at an equity rating that put us at, what, 62, 38, because we're actually
stay in the L because we would have had to have funded the entire project locally. We would have had to have financed ourselves $60 million and built the whole project ourselves until the OFCC would have come through and refunded or reimbursed us the money back. And that could have taken years.
Why
And
did
so,
we go into it briefly? and
why
come
did
back
we? We did because the OFCC, we had passed our issue. We had passed. And the OFCC put a halt to all funding of projects because of COVID, because of the pandemic.
Take advantage of the low interest rate.
Correct.
Faster than it gets.
Correct. And we had passed our local share, so we were trying to get the building going. So we changed directions, went with the ELP, and then we were notified in December that they were gonna fund us through the CFAC program, which is why we went back.
I mean, I think the ultimate point on all that is that that discussion's kind of moot at this point, right? And so, rather than spend more time on it. Any other discussion on, building project issues?
I just have a couple questions, and it's just some possible misconceptions people have, and I want to make sure that it gets on the record. Prior to changing the project and adding the extra wing, the board voted for $2.5 million of LFI money to go to extra classrooms, correct?
That sounds about right. Steve, does that sound about right?
It's about 1.9 million currently.
Oh, it's
Yes.
1.9?
Yep.
Well, now that we have all this whole building full of extra classrooms, is there any way at this time we could revisit that, or is that locked in and there's nothing we can do about it?
So I'm gonna take that one a little bit, and then architecturally, they can answer that. So when they make their projections, and I'm glad OOCC isn't here, because they can hear me yell about this one more time, they project our enrollment going down. They actually project our enrollment to be 1,703 students. Right now, today, we have about 1,800 students, and I will tell you from where I sit, I don't see our enrollment going down. I believe that is not going to be correct. So let me give you an example. They would anticipate that we would really only need 5 kindergarten classrooms based upon enrollment numbers. Currently, we have 7 kindergarten teachers. We've said our goal is to have about a 1 to 20 average in K1, and then grades 2 and above, we have a 1 to 25 ratio. Right now, in kindergarten and first grade, we are right on the money at 1 to 20. So I don't know if this is a trend with bigger years. I gotta get it right. The second grade class is a good sized class. And first grade is a little bit smaller, kindergarten is big again. Kindergarten is big around the state because parents kept their kids home for an extra year because of last year being a weird year. So we don't know if it's a thing, if it's a trend for us yet. I think we're gonna find out this coming year with the incoming kindergarten class. But I will tell you that the kids are already coming, at least in the system, in the younger grades. In our high school right now, we're down to about on an average, and you guys get the enrollment package, but we're about 120 class size, about grades 6 through 12. You got a bigger class in there, about 130 here or there. But we're starting to see the 140s and 150s again, which historically, looking at Valley View's numbers, is about where Valley View has been for a number of years. We were about at the 150 mark. So I think we're gonna find out now, but I will tell you, we actually, in the elementary, we already need some of those spaces that we've allocated for because we've already outgrown what the state thought we were gonna be because they thought our enrollment was gonna be 1,703.
So Ben, one of the things that we talked about, and I think it was the December meeting, we talked and the state made very clear that having taken K through 12 money, we don't know about to put K through 12 in the building.
Yes.
Right? If we take that money and don't put it in, that becomes a problem.
Yes.
Now, if we allocate classroom space according to their numbers and outgrow it, how can they complain when we move the junior high back to this building?
So if that's what we had to do later on, so Steve's gonna correct me here if I'm wrong. If down the road, if we had to outgrow it, then we gotta do what we've gotta do, and the state doesn't get any say about that. If we are building a project, we cannot build a project and say, well, we're putting 6 grade here, but give us the money for 6 grade.
Right.
But if down the road, if we were to outgrow, and that was one of the benefits of keeping this building as well, is it gives us a flex space that if we were to ever outgrow the need of the building, it does give us a space to go to without having to go back to the taxpayers for some additional money, at least for a significant period of time.
It would seem to me then something we might want to consider, that if we've already paid, or we've already put in place the square footage, but the state has said what our classroom needs are going to be, that maybe we could use some of that square footage that we paid $2 million for to address some of the concerns that the community has with that building, and not use it as classroom space, and use what the state estimates we need for classroom space, and maybe expedite that move of our junior high students, even if it's 1 grade at a time, over a period of time, back to this building. It seems like we might be able to save some money there, and then not spend the $2.5 million estimated in reworking this building. Something to think about. I mean, that would be a good work session conversation. You gentlemen have any thoughts on that idea?
No, I tell you, my thought on it is, the state of Ohio is the big gorilla in the room, and I'm just a contractor. And so my involvement in it is partway through design, budgeting, construct, and that. I'm actually the gentleman that built Middletown High School and Middle School. And right out of the gate, they needed more classrooms as soon as we were finished. The big part of it wasn't a population growth as much as it was, they had a new school in Fenwick, right outside of town. Kids started to come back to the public school, and they was running out of space. And when OFCC was approached with this, their statement was, we're gone. We're done. We've spent our money here. We've done what we needed to do. What you do with it now is your point. I hear talk about the rest of them. The multi-purpose room, fantastic idea. You know, I mean, there's spaces, there's spaces that can be utilized. Do you call it that tomorrow? No, and I'm sure I'm being recorded, and I'll hear from OFCC people, and it is what it is. But it's real, and it's every school district's pain. I also worked on the Lebanon City Schools. Thanks for liking those.
They're great buildings.
So it's every district, it's every project, but they're not insurmountable. Can I say I can build 20,000 square foot wrestling room? No, OSDM manual won't allow it. Or they'll say, we'll pay for the 1,000, but you gotta figure out how to pay for the rest. But there's ways to skin cats. You know, there is ways to get what you gotta be, but sometimes it takes closing out the project and then doing what you want with the spaces. And you've got a lot of spaces to do that with. 200,000 square foot building, that's a big building. It's gonna be a nice campus, plus having this next door. It's just something to look to. But at the end of the day, those are real good options.
Thank you. Any other discussion on item Roman 5?
Mr. Skidmore, did you have?
I'm sorry, you had more questions.
Hi. He answered part of what I said, but I know Ms. Gilbert talked about the pipeline, and I've heard that from many community members. Can the architects speak to the safety or the concerns, or?
We have been in contact with the pipeline company, and I will just read what they said to us, just so everybody hears this. Any pipe grade upgrades triggered by a pipe classification change due to human occupancy increases around our line will be the responsibility of Texas Eastern Transmission and Bridge. So, and we've talked to the Public Utility Commission. No, there's no cost to the school district. You are not violating anything that PUC regulates. And if there's any impact or improvements necessary, they did verify that it's the pipeline's responsibility to do so.
Any other questions, comments? All right, let's move on on to Roman numeral 6, financial reports.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Can I make a comment about the buildings, or a question? Sorry, before you move on, sorry. I have a lot of questions. One of the really big ones, and especially as we talk about the future of this building and some of the other big things we talked about. Whole way through this process, Mr. Richards, you were excited about an auditoria. Same thing as a cafeteria, different name, in the new building. Because the cafeteria is not going to be used for anything other than feeding students otherwise. So that's why we've been talking about the auditoria the whole way through. Looked at the one in Cary, so on. Seemed like a nice feature. I don't know what the cost difference is, but along with that, the whole way through the process, we always said a district can never have too many gyms. At what point did we change from the auditoria cafeteria idea in the new building to dismantling a good gym right here on site and turning it into an auditorium? And what is the cost difference between upgrading our cafeteria to an auditoria versus taking this gym and turning it into an auditorium? And I mean, there's a lot of other, how long do we have to keep making these changes? And I mean, some of these are pretty big ones.
So that had to go by the wayside for the kind of cafeteria type thing, cafetorium. There were a whole bunch of LFIs that we had kind of anticipated, and when those cost sets changed, some of those things had to go by the wayside as well in order to pay for it. So that's where that went by the wayside. I am not talking about dismantling this gym as a gym at all. I think it can serve multiple purposes for us, and I think it has some flexibility for us. But I agree with you, you can't have enough gym space in the district. So I don't think we should, I just think this space can serve more purposes for us. Then I think it could be a gym and an auditorium for us. And we can do that very bluntly a lot cheaper. So I think the original cost for a cafetorium for that additional square footage and fixed seating was around $900,000. Does that sound right, Steve?
Yes, about here. Yep.
So when we were looking at anticipating $2.5 million to do everything in here to renovate it, it just became a more cost-effective notion to take a space that has multiple flexibility. And what I can say, there is the ability to use the current cafeteria as a wrestling room as well. That's absolutely fine.
We would just have that storage.
Yeah, and that's a lot easier. Very bluntly, talking to Coach Miller, and I was, believe it or not, I was a former wrestler back in 103 pounds. You guys can all laugh later on, or you can laugh right now, it's fine. It's absolutely okay. It stinks having to set up and tear down mats every single day. I'll tell you that. If you're a wrestler, that is not ideal. In talking to Coach Miller, he would prefer not to have to do that. And I completely understand that. That is not meant disrespectfully at all. Part of my job as a freshman was having to set up and tear down the mats and being the one to have to mop it.
I will say this, though, I think if Miller had the choice of, if we have to roll out
Yeah.
mats to be in the new building, he would want to.
Well, he's gonna be part of that conversation, so,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's where some of that went, Mr. Elias, is when we looked at those cost sets to be able to afford to do this, some of those LFIs had to go by the wayside.
Sure.
So you're saying we can use this gym as a gym now? Because that's not what we were told. You said baseball and softball is going to get the band room.
No, I said that's a possibility. I didn't say that anything, there is nothing set in stone, and that's why we're gonna have a meeting here coming up next week to be able to talk about some of those things. So there's nothing set in stone at all for this building.
Along those lines, I think it's important, and I think this will involve you, and I think this will involve our guests here. I think it's important that the board get a timeline of when those drop dead dates are gonna be,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of decisions to be made, and we need to navigate that.
Absolutely.
Any other comments or thoughts?
Are we going to take the time to ask them about the industrial tech space? Keep hearing about wrestling, wrestling last night.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm talking academic.
Can that be answered tonight?
Sure. Answer.
Yep. So what we are doing is, with the industrial tech, mod tech is the same as industrial tech. It's just the state's name for it. Now, what industrial tech looks like, I know Mr. McKee is up here, our high school principal. What that looks like moving forward, it is still to be determined. You are correct, the current teacher we have, Mr. Schultz, is fantastic. You are correct as well that he is a retired. I can say that there is only one school in the state of Ohio that produces teachers for industrial tech. Go Ohio Northern University, go Polar Bears. It's the only school in the state of Ohio that you can graduate with a teaching license to be industrial tech. I will tell you, they're getting really hard to find, certified industrial tech teachers.
But you can also just pull from the industry, and then they can get there.
So as a public school, there's a few more hiccups for us to try to do it that way. Career centers have a lot more latitude with that, which is very bluntly why career centers are the ones hiring industrial tech teachers. That being said, we can still have industrial tech or some version of it, and that's what we're looking at. Mr. McKee is working with the kids to see what that could exactly look like. 100% agree with you, it needs to be a pre-engineering focus. We need to have abilities for our kids to do things, especially in that pre-engineering field, and that's something that Mr. McKee has been working on. So there's not a shared space. It will be for industrial tech, let's call it mod tech. I think maybe the confusion is that we refer to it as both industrial tech and mod tech. The state refers to it as mod tech, so we use both terms interchangeably. That does not mean it's shared between, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. So there is no sharing of space. There will be one teacher in there, but exactly what courses they're going to teach might be flexible. So for right now, we have a lot of, it's a lot of wood shop. We're heavy on wood. Well, most industrial tech teachers, the ones that are coming out now from college, they also want to do robotics. They want to do pre-engineering, CAD, stuff like that. So so those are the things that we're looking at. Computer science kind of gets caught up in that a little bit, it could. So Mr. McKee's been working with his staff as to what that could look like moving forward, but it will be a person with the intent of being, we'll kind of say STEM focused in a hands-on sense that you're talking about, because I think that is extremely important. But what that looks like in the certification of who teaches it, that could all be somewhat flexible. We're just trying to make sure that we design a space for our future moving forward. And very bluntly, you don't find a ton of people that want to do just wood shop. The people that are doing that now, they want to do pre-engineering, they want to do robotics and things of that nature. So that's what Mr. McKee has been working on.
How does it explain that the middle school also has modular tech? So the high school has modular tech square footage and the middle school?
Yes. So
Why not get rid of the middle school square footage, make the high school one larger and have it 7 through 12 modular tech space? That would mean you have two teachers, middle school and high school.
So we currently have a teacher at our junior high, Mrs. Weaver, who teaches STEM, and that's what we call as the mod tech space. And Mrs. Weaver has done some really phenomenal things. You see her in the newspaper on a pretty regular basis. Thank you, Mr. Cummings. She's done high altitude balloons and things of that nature, trying to grow organisms on Mars climate. She's really a pretty remarkable teacher. So as it stands right now, what we're really trying to do, and you'll also notice in the drawings that we're hopeful to have an elementary STEM class as well, because we would actually like STEM to be one of the rotations that our kids can have at the elementary level. So the goal, and this is part of strategic planning, is that we eventually have STEM grades K through 12. And so we wanted to make sure we designed a building that would support that initiative so that our kids would be exposed to STEM K through 12.
So what's the Project Lab 1 and Project Lab 2 in middle school? Would that be for Mrs. Weaver?
The space for Mrs. Weaver, I think Steve, it was just called mod tech in June.
So what happens in two Project Labs?
Science.
Those are science classes.
They're not called science labs like that.
It's just the terminology from OFCC.
All right, we're good to go? Any more questions, folks? All right, item 6, financial reports and requests. Subheading A, approved financial statements for the month ended December 31st, 2021, which is attachment number 2 in your package. You all had a couple days to look at that. And we have a motion to approve the financial reports. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. Any discussion?
I have just a few comments.
Yes.
And I did have the opportunity to meet with 3 new board members back in December, prior to you taking office, just to kind of go over this. And so I hope that that was helpful, and my door is always open, and I'm happy to answer questions. We're halfway through the fiscal year, and our revenue is running ahead about $300,000 ahead of estimate, and our expenses are under by about $450,000. December was a pretty, not a remarkable month. There really wasn't a whole lot that happened, so there's not much to report on. I will tell you, though, that Friday, we did receive our first school foundation payment that includes the new state funding formula. So I'm in the process of analyzing those numbers. It's not fully implemented yet. They've already told us that there could be changes that happen all the way through March. But I do hope for our February board meeting that I can give you some, and potentially even before, but I'll report it then at the February board meeting, some information on what that looks like for us. But I do believe our revenue is going to be up a little bit more than what we had anticipated, which is good. It was what I had hoped for, but we just weren't sure when we put our estimates together at the beginning of the year. And so that's good news. I was happy to see that increase in funding that we saw last Friday. So more to come on that, but that's it for me for tonight, unless you have questions.
So we're approximately 750,000 to be good, with the 300,000 more and 450,000 less on the spending.
Through
side.
December, yes.
Okay.
And that is typical for us. We tend to run a little bit ahead in the revenue and a little bit under on expenses.
We appreciate the concern.
Conservative nature of treasurers, I guess.
Absolutely. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 7, discussion of COVID protocols.
Yeah, this one's me. For staff or parents that are aware of this, last week when we started off on Monday, we came back with gangbusters. Life was good. Our attendance rate at the high school on Monday, I think, was about 95%. That's like a pre-COVID number. 95% is a great number for us at the high school. That's about normal. During the course of last week, the numbers kind of kept trending downward a little bit. We kind of said, well, we need to wait and see how the weekend goes. Maybe the weekend will help us, or maybe the weekend's going to hurt us. What I can tell you is from today, I don't know if it hurt us, but it's definitely not helping us. Right now, the high school started off, the attendance rate today, Mr. McKee is here, I think you started off at 84%, and by the end of the day, you had finished at 79%. 79%. And additionally, we're not having, for those of you that have little ones at home, we're not having a big problem with the little ones being sick at school. That was right before break, we had that. But we've got elementary staff. We have a number of staff that are out. So just as we're looking about things, and I know some of you look on the news and you hear about, this school has gone remote and this school has gone remote, and I think Centerville had a delay because of transportation today and various things that we are, I don't want to sugarcoat it, we're facing problems here, staffing-wise, with our kids staying in school and keeping them healthy. It's something that's very real. At the elementary, I don't know if any of our teachers have had a planning period for a while, because they're usually covering classes. Like I said, high school, junior high staff have been a little bit better, not a lot. I see Mrs. Hutchinson up there. It's better. Statistically, it's better. I can look at numbers and I can tell you it's better.
Not today.
But we're really struggling right now with things, and so I know I've sent out, and this all happened over break. I know the CDC has changed some of the guidance. Some of that's actually for the better for us, to try to keep people more in school, because if you don't know, we've sent out, if a person now tests positive, after 5, right now, the old guidance was they had to quarantine for 10 days. The new guidance is they have to quarantine for 5. If they're feeling better after the 5th day, days 6 through 10, they can return to work or school, but must wear a mask for days 6 through 10. So that helps us on some regards. We actually had 2 staff members that benefited us. They missed, I think, at the elementary, I think they missed school Monday, because that was part of day 5, but then they were able to return on Tuesday. So we have benefited from some of those changes, but we are still struggling. And so I bring that up as a discussion point. I know that, I won't try to look at it, but I know one of you has some significant healthcare experience on the board, so your opinions would probably be valuable as well. But it is something that we're struggling with, and I just want to make certain, if for nothing else, and to let people know, we are struggling right now. And so what we have to consider, I think we're kind of at a place, I think what we found before break, doing the hybrid. You can do hybrid. By hybrid, what I mean is kids can come to school or stay at home, parents' choice. We can do that in grades 7 through 12. Relatively easy. I don't want to say it's awesome, but it's not as hard. It is not feasible to do that with kindergarten through 3rd grade. It isn't. Those of you that have little kids at home, I think you can back me up on that. It's just, remote learning is probably, we're talking about paper, pencil packets and stuff like that. Just trying to get them to use the computer correctly. And I'm not putting down any of our primary teachers. I'm not putting down our primary kids. It's just the difference of what they're capable of doing. So there is already a letter that was signed by I believe it's every children's hospital in the state of Ohio, that has asked us to all schools, not just us, all schools to have mask mandates. I'm not a big fan of mask mandates. I don't like mandating something, but I will say, I think we've got to do something different right now, because the system that we're on is not sustainable. From what I'm hearing from healthcare people, I think this is we're in the eye of the storm right now. I think it's hopefully going to get better here in not too long. It's kind of what I'm hearing, but we are in a storm right now, and it's I'm just telling you, it's hard right now. I've spent most of today doing that. I think Mr. McKee spent most of his day dealing with COVID. Mrs. Schmidt spent most of her day dealing with it, and kids testing positive. I wanted to bring it up as a discussion to get the feedback from the board as to your guys' thoughts about things moving forward.
Any comments, thoughts?
I'll go ahead and speak.
Yeah.
So I can definitely tell you at Baby Children's, our admissions for pediatric COVID cases are definitely on the rise. And the kids are a lot sicker, which is kind of strange, because if you listen to the media, it says Omicron is more contagious, but, seemingly everybody seems to be doing okay with it. It doesn't seem to be as severe symptoms. We're not necessarily seeing that in the pediatric world, so I can share that with you. I asked them to actually give me the numbers, so I can share it with you today, and you're not gonna have the numbers till tomorrow, so that doesn't help you. But I did go to Montgomery County, Ohio's ticker counter, if you will, and as of Friday, for the area codes 45327 and area codes 45325. Last week, there was 90 cases of COVID. This week, 1,942. This is our zip codes, okay? For 45325, last week, 23 positive cases for COVID. This week, 482. We here are in the red, okay? I don't know how long we'll stay in the red. I know that Franklin High School was closed today. I know Oakwood has tried to avoid mask mandates the whole year, but they did for the very first time, coming back from January, they decided to do a 4-week stint of mask mandate, and then they're gonna get rid of it. So just trying to get through that big peak. I live and breathe through this every day with a face shield, and sometimes a lot more than that. And I've been doing that for almost 2 years now. Not pleasant. I don't enjoy it. I wish I didn't have to do it, but I understand it. Okay. I may not be very popular here, but I think that it would be easier for contact tracing and trying to protect not just kids, but even the adults out in the community, if we did just a temporary couple of weeks, whatever we need to do just to get through the peak. We've already lost one school employee. I don't know anybody in this room who doesn't know somebody who's been ill with COVID. We had a family member who was hospitalized just this last week. Pretty scary stuff, very, very scary stuff. And in my opinion, one death is too many. Dee Littrell was a wonderful lady. I knew her very well, and it's just heartbreaking. And as much as I want to say that, everybody should have a choice, I'm going to have to stand with what I really feel is the best, just looking at these numbers and looking in my ICU and seeing those kids in there.
I'll share my thoughts on it, a couple. First of all, I'm not a COVID denier. I've been to COVID funerals. this level, and even someone higher than this has the authority to have a mandate and hasn't done it.
Yes.
I question the efficacy of a mandate in the schools for a couple of reasons. For the little ones, one, the problem right now is with the teachers. And if you want to tell teachers to wear masks, that's a whole different story.
Well, I will tell you, the quick version is the ones that have gotten it are wearing a mask, and I think they would be okay with me sharing this. The majority of ones that have tested positive are actually vaccinated as well. So,
My concern with the mandate, one, just the basic concern of the mandate in general. But with regard to the little ones, I think it's the illusion of protection, because I have yet to see a first grader who can wear a mask properly and not fidget. I think we are somewhat deceiving ourselves if we think that that's going to solve that problem. At the high school level, for better or for worse, my concern is that it's the illusion of a solution, because they can wear a mask in school all day. Most of them are going to be wearing them on top of their heads or below their chins, because that's what teenagers do. And then as soon as that final bell rings, 5 of them are going to climb in the same car, they're going to take off their masks, and they're going to go do what they need to do. And so my concern is that when we create this mandate, it might satisfy some desire to create a safety situation for kids. I'm not sure that it accomplishes that, and I think that there's substantial negative pushback in the community that correlates with that.
I agree, that's why I wanted to bring it up.
And so from my perspective, I don't think it accomplishes what we wanted to do. I do think that we can ask, and that we have the issue with religious exemptions, et cetera, and so we're going to have that consideration as well. But I don't think it accomplishes, and I think the fallout on that is significant.
Well, and one of the cases that I think we can say here tonight, and I said that I was going to bring up, I would highly encourage people, and we'll send this out as well. And I know we've said this a few times. I appreciate everybody wanting to kind of cowboy up, and John Wayne, if you're not feeling well, that's kind of the old metric is, I'm not feeling well. And I bet you we have a lot of teachers that used to, as a practice, hey, you're not feeling well, I'm good enough, and it's better. I'm better than having a sub in my kid's room, so I'm going to still come. An example that we had today, yet again, I'm not faulting anybody, but we had a student at the high school that tested positive. By the way, we had over 11 people test positive at the high school today. So we had a high school student that tested positive, and Mr. McKee is having to do the contact tracing. He says, all right, when did you first exhibit symptoms? And the student said, I wasn't really feeling good all last week, but I still was coming to school because I want to go to school because it's important, which is a great attitude. That's what we want. But what that means is now Mr. McKee and his staff have to contact trace everyone that student was with all last week. And it's a tricky situation, and I get it. I grew up in an era that, if limbs weren't falling off, you were expected to go to school. And that wasn't a bad thing, that's a good thing. But in today's day and age, when we have COVID, and Ms. Smith, thank you for sharing the numbers that you did, it's actually causing us, that phenomenon, that mindset actually causes us problems. And so I would really just kind of beg and implore people, if your kid's not feeling good, I know it's a pain, especially with the younger kids possibly having to stay home, and supervision is an issue. But just please keep your kids that aren't feeling well at home. It's better to help us for a few days, keep them at home, than to run the risk of, like I said, it was 11 people today at the high school, wasn't it, Mr. McKee?
16.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was an
16
increase.
by the end of the day.
Well, I talked to him at 11, so, 16. So and that kind of is reflected in the numbers. I think, Ms. Smith, those are the numbers that we're seeing as well. So if you're talking about zip code wide, I think we are seeing that in our schools as well. So,
Now, I will say, and it has been, I have seen photos posted on the school's Facebook page and the website, student of the month, this kid, that kid, whatever. They are not wearing their masks appropriately, and it's very much pointless if they're not. And I understand teachers are very fatigued, they're policing these masks, and I can't even imagine, all these months later, how that must feel. And some of those masks are not appropriate, and they absolutely will not even come close to stopping the spread. It has to be at least a 2 to 3 layer fabric mask, and most of them are not wearing that. They're wearing a little gator mask. Those aren't even allowed in my hospital at all. With that point being said, if it even slows it just slightly, again, I'm not big on pushing masks on kids, but if we can just do it a few weeks just to get through this peak. I know my colleagues at the hospital would appreciate the slowdown. We're pretty tired.
We've got 2 students on the board. I think it's always great getting student feedback, and this is a topic that is, you guys are living with, and listening to Mr. Keith's number today, you guys were probably listening to a number of people call down to the office. I don't know if you guys had, maybe you guys were called down to the office, but anything that you guys wanted to share on this topic, just as students from your perspective?
I can really speak for the elementary and intermediate, but high school, we've definitely lost a large quantity of people and the students and also the staff. There were at least 3 of my classes today where we did not have the, like, teachers we normally did. We either had substitutes, or at one point our class, half of us was moved to the study hall, the other half was moved to a class where they were working on stuff in there, and like we had to just squeeze in. And I think it is feasible for high schoolers to go online. We're able to do that unlike the younger kids, but it's still not as effective as much as some people may want it to go off for 2 weeks. It definitely has negative results. And if it were up to me, I would definitely recommend going in. I don't like mandates. I think people should have the choice, but in times like this, when it goes into the red and we have a large number of cases spiking, then it should be a temporary thing that can be taken away pretty soon, like as soon as it can. But I would highly recommend going with masks as soon as possible, so that way the cases can lower and then we can go back to normal again. Because I think going maskless for a while was effective, but now that the world is spiking again, we need to change with that.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a hit right now with it. And although I do agree with what Mr. Rudd is saying, that it does seem a little bit pointless to be wearing a mask during the school day, and after school they all hang out, everybody knows each other and whatever. But I also do completely understand what Ms. Smith is saying in that we are here for 7 hours a day, so we might as well do what we can while we're here, especially given how dire the situation is becoming. And I would like to speak about the current protocol that we have when students are called down, they're informed that they can contact trace, and then they're given an option to wear a mask for the next however long, 10 days, or go home for that time. My issue with that is that a student could get called down to wear a mask, and then they can go back to class, and then the next period, they could potentially take off the mask, and there's really not a very effective way of policing that, because it's very easy in a crowd to just like not realize, oh, this person is supposed to have a mask, this person's not supposed to have a mask, this person doesn't have to have a mask. And so it seems to be that it would be easier, just as, to make it more of a blanket approach of everybody does it, and we can keep track of it easier that way, versus this person is contact traced, they were in contact with someone who had COVID, and now they could potentially walk around without a mask, and it kind of goes, it's easy to lose track of that.
Mr. McKeith, when we did that, I think the original thought process was we weren't gonna have a ton of people that were contact traced, and we have a spreadsheet, and we'd be able to track those kids, those individuals a little bit easier. And with the rate that we've had now, it's a much bigger, I think to your point, it's just a much bigger number than when we first started this. It was very, I don't want to say very manageable, but it was relatively manageable. And what we've seen here the past little bit is it's becoming less and less manageable. And I think that goes to your point, Mr. Crable.
Another thing that I would say too is, well, high schoolers sometimes will take off masks. A huge reason why a lot of people I know want to wear masks, are thinking about it, but they're not doing it because other people aren't doing it. I know a large amount of people who would wear them if it was a mandate, and then other people who might mess with them, then again, we can do what we've been doing and address them and ask them to wear it. But I could be wrong about this. I thought there was a study that came out that said that it's actually recommended you take it off for like a minute or so. It's like, I don't believe that would be the worst thing, because if everyone else has it on.
So it's a sticky wicket, which is why I wanted to kind of get feedback from the board. I think I've heard from Mr. Rudd and Mrs. Smith. Anybody else want to kind of weigh in? And I don't know if we wanted to take board action, we could take board action, or what I'm really doing is just looking for feedback from the board.
I would recommend I wouldn't mandate anything.
I'm supportive of the mandate I was previously, and, you know, I, like, you know, Ms. Smith suggested though that it be a temporary fix and follow the data like you always have, throughout this process, and when our numbers are no longer, in a position where we need to be overly concerned about it, then, I think that it would be prudent to get rid of it.
I don't want, again, I'm speaking, we've heard a lot from the high school people. That's my experience too, so I can't speak for the elementary. I do have a question though, is how close are we to having to go hybrid?
So what I have previously kind of stated is my ballpark figure is 2 days of, and my understanding is that this is what we did, this is serious, if you know me, what was the district had like 7 years ago, no, it wasn't SARS, what was it?
Norovirus.
Thank you, norovirus. That we actually shut down for about a week, and the standard for that was multiple days under 80% attendance. So I've been kind of using that as a ballpark. Now, whether or not we count the high school as under 80% today, it didn't start off under 80%, but it did finish today, that'd be something to look at. But I think part of it is, the whole reason to look at going hybrid or remote or anything is to stop that spread. It's when it's growing. I think most parents probably understood why we did this right before winter break, because it was, holy cow, was it going around the schools, even the elementary school. If you really want to ask a question, you should ask Mrs. Sears about what the Thursday before winter break looked like. She'll give you some fun stories about what that day was like over there with the little kids. But that's kind of the measure that I've been using, kind of as a ballpark to help inform the decisions. I don't want to make it a hard, fast rule because there's always exceptions. But for example, I can tell you today we had a roughly 82% staff attendance at the elementary. And that was mostly, I mean, there's a few exceptions for different things, but that was a lot of it due to COVID related. We've had, so that people can also understand, I'm starting to lose my voice. We've had our multiple handicap unit at the elementary. Most of the students in that unit cannot wear a mask. Medically, they can't. It's not a choice, they're not choosing, they can't wear a mask. We had a student that tested positive. Almost said, hey, if you can't wear a mask per the guidelines, that we can't have school. So in my opinion, Mr. Phillips is in charge of this unit. For some of our most at-risk students at school, we've now said they can't be at school for 10 days. That's a really tough pill for me to have to swallow. That's a really tough pill to swallow. That's what the guidelines are, so we're following those guidelines. I even double checked with the health department just to make sure it's what we have to do, and they're like, yes, it is what you have to do. So it's just something that, Mr. Skidmore, that we're struggling with. Elementary numbers, I'm gonna knock on wood, and Mrs. Sears has been great, she keeps giving me those numbers daily. I think we were about 92, 94% today, student attendance. So the students at the elementary are doing okay. Now I know that towards the end, as the day went on, there were a number of kids that tested positive towards the end of the day at the elementary as well. I don't know what the number is there. But it's just becoming, it's like everywhere, it's just becoming a problem. I would say if we don't see something change, we're looking at probably having to do like a hybrid learning or something of that nature even later on this week. That's just where we are. And my goal is I don't want this to spread any more than it's spreading. So that's kind of where we are, Mr. Skidmore.
Personally, I've always said I'm against mask mandates, but I'm an educator and I want kids to be able to go to school. If we can keep them in school, I would support it if it's a very short, limited time and then we revisit it.
Someone want to make a motion?
Well, I don't think you really wanted board action, did you?
Well, it'd be awfully nice because, and I say this with all respect, I've heard 5 very, very different opinions, which is fine. That's what a Board of Education can do. I'll be honest, I haven't really heard a full consensus of where we want to go. So a motion would actually be appreciated. If someone wanted to have something, it'd be nice to have something a little bit more clear as to what our direction was, rather than just, Mr. Richards, you go make up something that's all on your own, and that's a lot to you. Having something that might be a little bit more codified would be, I think, helpful.
I make a motion that we vest Mr. Richards with authority, short of a mask mandate, to address this issue, rather a student mask mandate, to address this issue, that we charge him with the responsibility of keeping us updated regularly, and that we be prepared for an emergency meeting if we need to take specific action in a fluid situation. But I can't see myself recommending a mandate.
When you say have an emergency action, is that relegated towards masks, or is that inclusive of having to go hybrid for a few?
It's inclusive of hybrid.
Okay,
In the past, the number was like 80%.
that's what I've kind of used.
And you were gonna make determination when it hits that number.
Yeah.
I don't feel as though we should mandate any masks until we hit those numbers that we've already talked about, but that's just my opinion, and I'm against mask mandates. I think it's choice.
I could also just add that I think if we learned anything from the previous year, it's that there's been a lack of communication between this community and the board, and it's been brought up time and time again, including tonight. And there were a multitude of students and staff members, I'm not going to name, who approached me during the school day today, and they asked me if we were going to be addressing this matter because they're afraid to come in for fear of the virus, and they want this to become action.
I'm happy to move for us to adopt a mask mandate for a period of time unless and until the numbers prove us to not be in the red any longer. I'm fully supportive of that. I don't know that Mr. Rudd's motion is, I don't know that it's necessary because that's essentially doing what we're doing currently.
Yeah.
The power vests in him.
I think you're right about that, actually. I thought about it after I said it.
So I'm happy to make that motion. If somebody would like to second it, we can vote on it and we can have an answer.
So clarifying, so long as we're in the red.
Yes.
It would be a
Yes,
mask
ma'am.
mandate. As soon as we're no longer in the red, do you know where to look, Mr. Richards?
Yep.
for that data?
Oh, yeah, we get that data.
We counting, not the.
I
zip
would like
code,
my Montgomery County
not
data
the
zip
schools.
code data.
We're not going by the school's numbers, we're going by we're gonna make kids wear masks. I'm just asking, because
What
So
are you
they-
doing?
they
What are you
can-
doing by it?
So I look at, I think, two factors. They do disaggregate the total COVID cases, and they can actually break it down for kids as well, by zip code. I don't think we look at just the county in general. We have a pretty expansive and diverse county where the needs are very different within the county. But I think we look at our zip code data, but we're also looking at our school data. And right now, what I would say is our zip code data and what we're seeing in the school are very much married. It's very reflective of that. There have been times where the county data was bad and we were good. There are times where the county, actually, I think the last I saw, the county data was, well, no, not this past week, but it was actually trending in a positive direction right before Christmas break, when in fact we were, now I don't think ours was COVID before Christmas break. From what I was hearing, it was strep, flu, and everything else but the kitchen sink. So I use our district data, what we're seeing on the ground in the district, and also that zip code data. That's what I've been looking at.
I know that Miamisburg was in the red last week, they're in the yellow this week, so this could be extremely temporary.
Absolutely.
And I normally don't like to push mandates either, but this is.
I'm just gonna point out, the National Guard has been called to help out in hospitals.
Yes.
That's, to me, that's a holy cow moment. And I'm not a big fan of mandates, so if we wanna try to do it a different way, I'm game with that. Mr. Cradwell, I think I can quote you, paraphrasing from the beginning of the year. The one good thing about having those weird wonky years that we had, is that I think think we appreciate what we have so much more now. And I'm gonna paraphrase you, by all means, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're like, we'll do whatever it takes, so that we don't have to go remote. We don't want to, I mean, they lost, holy cow, that was your junior year. I mean, these are seniors. The only normal year of school that they've had is their freshman year. That's it. And so this is my take on you guys, by all means chime in. I think the students that I hear from are very much going, they appreciate what they do have, and they don't want to lose, again, what they've lost in the past. It's very real for us right now in all the buildings.
I will second.
Do you have any additional discussion?
I know this is a board meeting, I'm really not supposed to talk, but everybody was doing it before. I just want to make it clear, the mandate is a separate issue. I worry that it really won't stop anything, because I don't think the masks are as effective as we wish they were. I would just ask that if we do have to address a lot of staff being out or a lot of student population being down, that we have at least like a 24-hour notice before we go remote again. I heard from a lot of teachers where that was very difficult, especially with primary kids. They have to get together a lot of paper pencil things. So if there is going to be that decision, if we could have a lot of foreknowledge about that. And I've also heard a lot of teachers saying the hybrid option may not be the best. It would probably be better to go full remote than saying you can come maybe, because you have no idea how many students will be in your room. And at the high school, not a lot come. At the younger grades, they do, and the staffing is an issue at the younger grades too, so that's not going to help with them having to cover classes and things like that. So maybe consider that with hybrid or pure remote better, and giving teachers warning, that's all.
The problem with the hybrid is this: I don't know who's in my building. So I had to give every single teacher a list the day before of the students that are actually in their class. And I only had them highlight the students that showed up, not the kids that were absent. Because if you have to evacuate those buildings, you don't know who you're evacuating. So I had a list for every single class that told me who was present. Now, in our building, which is what I do primary, I do preschool through 6th grade. We were like at about 60% on that Friday the 17th, but it's the day before Christmas and kids want to come. I mean, it's a fun day. So they were there. But did anybody think if I had to evacuate that building, how would I know who was there and who wasn't? They weren't doing daily attendance. The daily attendance screen was no one present in the primary and no one present in the intermediate. Now, if you go look today, the teachers have recorded kids that were missing assignments that chose to stay home. And I'm putting those today. So you're going to look on December 17th, so-and-so missed 2 hours of an assignment. They were counted absent because they didn't do the schoolwork. Otherwise, the only ones listed are the kids that missed an assignment. If they stayed home and did their assignment, they aren't recorded. Well, you know, I'm not complaining, I do it for 1,000 kids, but what I'm saying is, you've got to know who's present in your buildings. What are you gonna do? If you would have to evacuate, and that was my only way of knowing, was each teacher highlighted whatever kids showed, and some teachers only had 6 kids, some kids had 18 kids, some classes had 18, but I put them in alphabetical order, by grade level. If I had to evacuate that building, I knew who we had to account for, because you couldn't look on a computer screen and see who was present or who wasn't present. You had no knowledge. I mean, it's hard to do that hybrid in the elementary age level.
Any additional discussion on Ms. Eisler's motion?
I've got 2 things. First of all, I agree with what they said about hybrid. I looked through it last year. If you have 25 kids in class and 3 kids are online, that's not a problem. But if you've got 25 kids in class, and 10 of them are in class, 15 are online, that's a problem. It doesn't work well. Second, about the mask mandate, I just want to be clear, if we vote on this, you said that while we're in the red, So does that mean the first day we're in the yellow, it comes off? Or how do we determine when it comes off if we don't pick a date to revisit it or to check?
I didn't see it in the rate. My initial proposal would have been that we just give it a period of time, so that way it's known. My thought would be if we just said, we start recommending it highly for this week, and then we mandate it for 2 weeks. That would be my thought, so that it's a short period of time, that way people know how long it's gonna last for, if we do something like that. I think one of the other problems with the mandate is the perpetual, we don't know how long it's gonna last for. If we go back to when all this started, we were told, oh, well, we just need to do this for like a few weeks, and then it's gonna be okay, and then a few weeks turned into a few months, and then months and a whole year. I think if we could set a period of time, my experience is that people are a little bit more game to do something if they know it's not if they know when there's a clear definitive end date. That's my thought. And if, to that point, if we needed to extend it longer than that, then maybe that is a cause for having a special board meeting to address that or something. But I think that's just my thought. If we were gonna do something like that, if we were gonna do, and I agree with you, Mr. Rudd, I'm not a big fan of the word mandate and haven't forced anybody to do anything. But if we were gonna have to do that, I think it would have to be for a specified period of time. That would be my thought, so that it would be clear to everybody when it's gonna happen.
It's already really hard to determine who has signed an exemption and who hasn't, and who is on the exemption list and who isn't. And it's hard to tell a third grader, are you on the exemption list? I don't know who's on the exemption list. I mean, when they're walking in a hall, and you can give me a list of names, and I see kids every single day, I know their faces, but I don't know that I know every single name. It's really hard on that, put that exemption in place, because some people already have an exemption, either religious or medical.
So to complicate the matters, and Mrs. Sears has a tremendous amount of experience, and she's right in what she's saying, especially at the elementary school. But we also have parents that are begging with me, pleading with me, like, please, for the love of God, please do not have my kid be at home. I can't get them to learn at home. In fact, we had this, that was one of the nice parts of COVID in 2020, is parents were going, my God, you guys have a tough job. I want to send my kid to suspension on a regular basis, but it's my own kid. That we have parents that frequently will tell us, like, I need my kid to be at school. My kid can't do it over a computer. Like, we try, and the parents, God bless them, they're trying, they really are. And so we understand full well when we don't have kids at school, people that we're turning to pick up the slack for that are the parents. And we've had a number of parents reach out to us saying, we can't do it. It's really hard to do that, but the older kids are a little bit more self-sufficient. And we can have the logic of, and if they don't do it, kind of shame on them a little bit. That they know how to do it, they're capable of doing it a little bit more. But we struggle at the elementary school. If we don't have school, and make sure I know this, and I know some people are hoping for like a snow day this week, doesn't look like it's gonna happen. That when we make those decisions to cancel school and do stuff, we don't take that lightly. Parents that work and have jobs, they now have to scramble to find childcare. Our job is not to provide childcare, our job is to educate kids, but we understand that our role has a significant impact on families. So I hear what everybody says. I will say, for every parent that says one thing, you can have another parent that says the exact opposite. One of the things that we might even consider, we still are allowed to have 5 calamity days. I'm gonna knock on wood right now in Ohio. It hasn't been I'm not gonna finish that statement, because it's Ohio. But is that something we could look at? Sure, we could look at using calamity days. I think Northridge did that last week. I think they started off on some calamity days, and then they just transitioned to remote learning for those days. So we have a number of possibilities, but I can't reiterate, for every parent that emails me and says, well, why don't you just do this? I have another parent that says, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard, just do the exact opposite. And both parents are right, they're just looking at it from their perspective. They're not wrong.
Yes, sir.
I know that we have Martin Luther King Day coming up on Monday.
Yep.
And 5 days is a quarantine. So wouldn't it make sense to possibly Thursday and Friday be remote, or Thursday be remote, Friday be a calamity day? Hopefully we come in on Tuesday, everybody's remarkably better, and then we don't have to worry about this other stuff.
Mr. Snout, it's like you read my mind. That's kind of what I was kind of looking at, just a little bit, because we do have a 3-day weekend coming up. That's been part of my thought process is, man, if we can gut our way through tomorrow and Wednesday, maybe we can look at Thursday and Friday. Just like we took advantage of the fact that we had Christmas break, we were able to take some of those days. We've got some of those days coming up that maybe we can take a look at.
We have a motion on the table right now, that we need to consider before we consider other options. We have a motion, a second, any further discussion? And this, I just want to correct me if I'm wrong, the motion, as you made it, was for the mask mandate while we remain in the red, is that correct?
For our zip codes.
For our zip codes. More discussion on that motion?
So there's not a specific date.
I am happy to make any friendly amendment. I just think it is important for us to put in some kind of safety protocol in the meantime. If you would like it to be a date certain, I am happy to amend my motion. I just know that historically, in making these COVID decisions, Mr. Richards has always, and this board has always relied upon the data, not a time certain. But if people are more comfortable with a time certain, I am happy to amend my, make a friendly amendment. Would you feel more comfortable that way?
I just want to make sure there's a point where we're checking to make sure we're off the red, and we.
Right. Well, just like Mrs. Smith
That's,
said.
that's why I asked, if it's yellow on
Right.
Friday, is it off on Friday? That was my question.
I think it goes weekly. I don't think it goes by day. I think it goes.
It's weekly.
It's weekly.
And no offense, but if we wait till next week,
Yeah.
those numbers are gonna triple.
Any more discussion on the motion as stated? All right, call the question.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. DeGrove?
No.
Mr. Rudd?
No.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Next item on our agenda is, it's Roman numeral.
And I'm sorry, really fast, can I clarify? My intent with that was that we would start that next week so that we can have plenty of time to communicate that. Is that, I should have asked for a clarification. Is that appropriate? I just, to go in and say that tomorrow it's what it is when we haven't communicated anything to anybody, I just think is a little bit quick. I think we need to give lead time.
I mean, I don't know that you need as far as next week is lead time.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm just looking for a little friendly guidance on that.
I personally would be inclined, if the board having made a decision that it did, I'd be inclined to have you use your discretion.
Okay, fair enough.
Excuse me, will there be exemptions?
That's right.
Will there be exemptions?
I think we have to honor the exemption.
I don't know if we can reverse that.
Okay.
But new exemptions?
Does the mandate require the proper mask? Because if the science states
No,
that
I
single
know.
mask doesn't help, is the mandate going to require the proper mask?
I took the forms away, so I just put them back on there, but.
We do have masks for anybody who wants one, like these disposable masks
Right.
that are the.
All right, let's move on to Roman numeral. We do need to keep the meeting moving. We're at an hour and 45 minutes. One thing that I do want to point out, that we have used some leeway in terms of community involvement outside of the community participation period. I personally like to do that on some of these bigger issues. If at some point we start having 3-hour meetings regularly, we'll probably bring that in. Okay, so don't think I'm being mean. It's just something we need to do to keep the movement going along, the meeting going on. Roman numeral 8, subset A, personnel, approve personnel action as recommended, attachment number 3 of your board packets. We've all had a chance to look at that. We have a motion to approve those personnel actions.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
We continue to try to hire more substitutes. That's something that we continue to do, and some of those people, I know the board in the organizational meeting gave me the authority to actually have people hired. We actually have one of those individuals who's turned in all their materials and has already been subbing for us. So we keep trying to. If anybody knows people that want to sub, Mr. Kazarik's over there. See him, and we would love to have you. Love it, especially if you want to be at the elementary.
Did we call the question on that one yet?
Not yet.
We have a motion approved, we have a second. Call the question?
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 8B, recommends the board approve Danny Jacoby be appointed as a trustee for the Germantown Public Library Board for the term expiring December 31st, 2027. So moved. Do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the question?
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 8C, recommend the board approve the 2022 and 2023 and 2023-2024 school calendars. Board copies have been enclosed. Do we have a motion to approve the calendars as enclosed?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion?
Yes, so actually, I'm going to turn to Mr. Kazarik to talk about the process. And since he collected all the data, we did a community survey. Mr. Kazarik collected all that data, and we surveyed the community, and parents, and we also surveyed the staff. And it's really nice when those two entities agree with one another on what they prefer, and that was the case this time around. So, Mr. Kazarik, I'll let you just talk this really briefly.
The board received a report from me and my board report on kind of what I tried to do with the committee. Want to thank the teachers and administrators that sat on that committee. We met several times since when Mr. Richards appointed me to do this and get involved with this. We tried to get at least 2 years of calendars taken care of. Not really something everybody thinks about. Mostly the big things. When do we start and when do we end? That's kind of what people worry about when it comes to that. And families want to take vacations, so I think it's important we get this pushed out here quickly. But yeah, we did survey the staff and parents through Parent Square, and both of them, actually the parents overwhelmingly picked calendar A for both, and the staff wasn't as high as the parents were, but they did. I did speak with some other people in the district about some other options. I wanted to get some of our families on what do they think about remote days, what do they think about pre or post Labor Day starts, is it related to the buildings that we're in currently, and will it relate to buildings that we are going to be in the future. Based on the parents that did respond back to that, they were very much in favor of a post Labor Day start, regardless of the building situation. That surprised me a little bit, but that's the way that kind of came back with that. So both of them are, both of those that were in favor on the survey were both post-Labor Day starts with that. And our families did appreciate some of the remote days, the way that we used them this year. We had them there at that Thanksgiving period time and whatnot. It was very family-oriented, I think. And I think our families appreciated that. So that's kind of what it did. Board, you got my packet to look through there. I did put in some of the comments in there. You can read through some of those. There were some issues on my part that I did go back and create and change, because I did do it through Google. It automatically changes it, so I didn't have to resend it all back out. So I did make those changes as people did communicate with me on there. But I did share those comments. I just put them on there. I did not respond back to a lot of those people individually. I can if you like, but there was a lot of different various comments that went in with that. But pretty much post-Labor Day start on both those years. We go through that. That's only the next 2 years, so that's still prior to us being in the new buildings. So.
Any comments or discussion, questions? I had one question, but you answered it. Was remote days. What was the basis for that? And if that was something the parents were requesting. I understand the timing of that around the Thanksgiving holiday does have some benefits. My comment is that your report to us was the perfect example of what it is I think as a board that we want to see in terms of making a decision. And for anybody watching or anybody who's here, there was a number of community comments that Mr. Kazarik took the time to included in this, so that we would understand what people were thinking about this. And I mean, there were pages of them, and it was very much appreciated, so thank you. You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? All right, call question.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. DeGroat?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 8D, recommend the board approve the replacement of turf at Nice Farm Field by the Montz Group at a cost of $396,500. The price is through cooperative purchasing, state term pricing, and does not require official bids. The cost will be paid out of the permanent improvement fund. All right, someone want to make a motion that we replace
So
it?
it's been talked about for several years now, and I think it's long past due. And I'm sure that the pricing is competitive, it's not cheap.
We need to have a motion first to discuss.
I made the motion, yes.
Yeah, do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Anything else, Ben?
No. I should not be.
We put two pens sitting next to one another.
Yeah, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that.
No, that's okay, we'll figure it out. Neither one of us have a lot of hair right now, so we can't use that. No, I will say, I think it was in November that we went to the board and asked for permission to look at moving forward on that, so that we could try to get going with the intent of making sure that we had field turf installed for next school year.
Right.
So we've been working on that process. I think I even shared with the board, we were anticipating a little over 400,000, so it's a little bit under what we originally thought, that's always good. But we do need to get moving on it so that we can try to have it installed for next year. I think some people probably know there was a school in our conference that tried that this year, and then they didn't have any home games. They had to play away for all of their home games. I think we would desperately like to avoid that scenario.
I would always recommend go to Madison and Franklin.
I suppose security, can you secure that price?
But yes, that's locked in.
Yeah, so we keep going up.
Yeah. So we're locked in right now, but that requires, and actually, Mr. Pugh's not here, we did get quotes as well. So your resolution, and you're required to say it, is that we're not required to get bids, but we did get quotes on this. So I just want people to know, what you said is what you have to say, but we did get quotes on that.
And so, other discussion, Mr. President, on the table?
No. I had one question. When you brought this up in November, you said there was a possibility of maybe some outside sources contributing. Did anything come about?
So there are still some possibilities. I will tell you those are looking less and less. There was a hope that there were some medical individuals that would come forward. I will tell you, and I hear it as well, we were about 10 years late for that initiative. There was a big push that hospitals used to fight each other for naming and spending and stuff. That's just not what hospitals are doing anymore. And when Mrs. Smith talks about what they're seeing in the hospital, I think with good reason, I'm not faulting them at all for that. So we are about I'd say we're about 10 years late for that. There's some other things that we're still looking at. I wouldn't get overly excited for it. But will we still keep shaking the trees? Absolutely.
I have a question,
Yeah.
and I raised it earlier with Ms. Sullivan. Obviously, we were looking at, last year somewhere about $500,000, my understanding, available PI funds. And I know that the prior board voted for the pitch roof, so that's going to be borrowed against some PI funds in the future. And I think, I want to clarify, make sure it's on the record, that if we vote to do this today, this will be not from the same pool of PI funds that we will be leveraging in the future, should we choose to leverage any further than what we have, and that there should be an influx of money into the PI fund sometime in the relatively near future.
Correct. We collect twice a year in our permanent improvement fund, and that's tax collections. And so we're coming upon our second collection for this current fiscal year. We have close to $800,000 available right now that's not spoken for. And that's just current cash in the bank for permanent improvement projects. We're gonna get another, and these are approximate numbers, $500,000. This spring is that second tax collection that we'll be getting. The borrowing that we have to do for the pitched roof and for any other items that are associated with the project, that's future collections. So the money that we have today, we have not designated that for that borrowing.
So, but one thing to consider is that anything we spend today, is less money we're gonna have in the future, because that
That's
future
correct.
money is gonna be tied up.
Yes, that's correct. Not all of it, though, because you know, part of that conversation was, we know that we need to preserve some of our permanent improvement dollars for things like
Sure.
a turf field 10 years from now again, you know, and that type of thing.
I think, thinking this through, Bob, how many competitions do we have a week on that field?
I think we figured, it varies, but it, sometimes 8, 9.
Oh, Coach down the road can help with that as well.
Yeah, you're gonna have 4 soccer games minimum, you're gonna have 3 football games, and then whatever the Pee-wee football, which could be 6 in a weekend.
Yeah. And-
So you're getting up there to teams.
And it's not something that's just aesthetics, it's not something that's just wear, I mean, it can become an injury issue.
We are close to a point where it would be a safety issue, or what they do on the field. Yet again, is it possible that we could get one more year out of it? Maybe, but then we run the risk of, if it's not okay, now what do we do? So I think this is just moving forward. We've gotten what more than what we anticipated for out of this field. It has served its purpose and then some.
Been recommended to be replaced at least 30 years.
Yeah.
Just make sure your end zones are the right color.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. That is my number one request. I don't care about the design, but dang it, it's gonna be the right color name, I'll tell you what. Appreciate it. Preach it, preach it.
Any additional discussion on that point? No? I think we can call the question.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 8. Weren't we just on 8?
Yes.
No, it's letters.
Oh, 8,
letters.
never mind. 8E. Recommend the board approve the high school and junior high course description guide. Board copies enclosed. We'll have a chance to look at those. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion?
I'm gonna say I'm very pleased with Mr. McKee and the high school staff for looking at how we can use staffing a little bit more effectively. One of the things that's in there, the legislature passed early this year, I think it was Senate Bill 1, that is gonna require financial literacy for this year's 8th graders. So we're actually gonna start offering that as an elective starting next year. And so I'm pleased with the work that the high school team and the BLT has done to kind of look forward and to try to use staff more efficiently and effectively.
I have just one thought on it. I think it was excellent. One thing that I would like to see, and I recognize there's always, money and teachers.
Yes.
In classroom space,
Yes.
those are our issues. The quote that you used earlier from Dewey, the purpose of education is to promulgate democracy.
Yes.
One thing that I noticed, and I know we teach it at younger ages, one thing I noticed that when it comes to American government, that the American government that we teach in 11th grade deals with pretty much Civil War and on. Is that accurate?
Government?
It's the AP government that deals with the Constitution, the foundational. And I might be wrong, but I mean, when I read.
We got 2 kids that just went through it. So.
Yeah, if I'm incorrect, tell me. I'm sorry, American.
Oh, dang it, they're both AP. Of course you were.
Okay.
Okay, there you go, perfect.
Yeah, American government, the description is the required course will explore the history of the United States from the post-Civil War period.
Okay.
Right, so at the high school level, if you want to get the foundational documents, if you want to get the 3 branches of government, all those things that we learned when we were younger,
Yes.
you gotta be an AP.
Okay.
And taking Dewey at his word, that the purpose of education is to promulgate democracy, I think that the high school aged mind is much better able, not just to memorize the facts about what we have, how the bill becomes law and all that, but to be able to understand how that affects real life. And I think it would be helpful, and again, not something we need to do this year, but it would be helpful if we put some thought into how we could make a government that would have genuine discussion of the way the world's supposed to work for our high school age students that aren't in the AP class. That's a thought.
I will say that the 11th grade government, it does cover a lot of those foundational topics. AP does definitely go into much deeper detail. Now that I think about it, I think probably what it means by post-Civil War is probably looking at the Supreme Court cases in that context.
Sure.
So it's definitely going back to like the beginning of the country in terms of like how we founded the government and how it works. So you definitely get that basic understanding in 11th grade. But yes, AP does go in much deeper context of all
Well,
that.
if what you're telling me is true, I have no reason to doubt you. Then my concern is not a concern. I just, if we could just.
Then we need to change the words.
I think it's a language issue.
Yeah, that was, when I read these, and believe it or not, I read these, that was the one concern.
No, perfect.
That's to say the main difference is just regular government, for the 11th grade is more of, it kind of just combines ideas you've learned about in previous years, where so you get a foundation of government you can use in real life, and then when you get to AP, it's more about real life events, how you apply those to things going on in your day-to-day life right now.
Okay, excellent. All right, that's my only comment I had on that, so I don't think, is there any other discussion? Then we can call the roll.
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Roman numeral 8F, recommend the board adopt the 2022 head varsity football coach resolution that was attached in your board packets. Since it's my motion, I will make the motion that we adopt the resolution as drafted. Do I have a second?
If we second, can we still amend it?
I believe a second can amend.
I will second.
We have discussion.
There's a lot of things that were said tonight that I was not aware of, but I think this should be a discussion of the whole board and really be the process done with all 5 of us and all about.
Okay, any other discussion?
I would agree with Mr. DeGrove that we do a first reading and then have a second reading, so that all 5 board members can provide, to get a little bit more context, and all 5 board members can provide input to the resolution.
Okay, since it's my motion, I'll discuss it as well. I drafted a resolution and presented to the board. The board has had it now for a month, or a week rather, to look at, the better part of a week. And it deals with creating a committee and directing the superintendent to solicit applications for the 2022 head football coach, varsity and high school. Whenever the board decides whether it should do something, and I think the board is fully capable of thinking through these issues here in public, in front of everybody tonight. Whenever the board decides whether it should do something, there are really 3 considerations. One, can we? And that was already answered this week. We definitely can. 2, must we? There are some things that are mandated. Those are rare. Should we? Should we take action to move to have a new football coach for next year? There are a couple of metrics that I wanted to think about, because what I hear tonight isn't news to me. What I heard back in February was news to me at the time. What I heard in March was not news to me because it was all come out very clearly. What I heard from Bob when he spoke to the board was shocking. And so, when I look at the metrics of whether or not you replace a football coach, first thing I want everybody to know, I don't want to be the football school board. I think we have a wounded community, and I think we have a problem in the community that the board created, and hindsight's 20/20. But the issue's not going away. The issue of the distrust, the issue of the way things went down, not just what went down. My concern is if we don't act, then we're going to be spending board time next month, the month after that, next August, next year. It's going to be an issue forever. It's not going away. And so kicking it down the road doesn't help. When I think about academic and scholastic sports, the first and most important thing to me is student participation. I think we're going to see it fall off. I think we're seeing it fall off. I think we're seeing it fall off in our weight room already. I want to see leadership and camaraderie. I didn't see it on the sidelines. I didn't see it in the faces of the athletes.
I didn't see it in the faces of the coaches towards the athletes or even towards one another. I think there was dysfunction. I think that we had a fall off in terms of tactics and execution, both of which you look to a coach. I think that what we heard tonight from Mr. Smith about the type of work that was put in by the coordinators, getting packets to the kids so that they could be prepared to do the work of playing the game. And that's something that they love. It's something that is a big deal to this community. Such a big deal that literally within a small number of 1,000 people signed a petition that said, please don't do what you're about to do. We remember that. We remember hundreds of people outside in the hallway, in the gym, because only 30 people could fit in a room to talk about this. And literally everybody that talked said, please don't do this. We have a situation where there's a wounded community, and we have a chance. We can't undo what was done. And the reason I say that is because he's sitting right here beside me. We can't undo what was done. But we can take a step back and redo with actual buy-in. When Bob Skidmore applied to be the head coach of the Valley View football program, back in the day, a long time ago, Bob. When Bob Skidmore applied, we were coming off 2 losing seasons. And yet there were 50 people that applied for that job, give or take. And numerous head coaches who were active head coaches. Why? Because coaching at Valley View is a big deal. And lots of people wanted it. Fast forward to last spring, we were coming off of multiple years to either the regional semis or the regional finals. And a highly successful program. My understanding is only one active head coach even applied and he got the job. And that was after the committee said, please don't do this. Do something, keep who we got. So we have a wounded community. And because of the way the community is wounded, community support has waned. It's waned. And there's no reason to point fingers to blame. We could do it, but nothing comes out of it. The question is, what do we do about it to make it better? How we got here was an unpopular decision. How we got here was an ineffective process. And so the question is, do we do something about it now? For a couple reasons. One, because it's not going away. This board will be talking about football for meetings and meetings and meetings unless we address this issue. 2, in 2 years, there's going to be another election. And people are going to be running on that issue if we don't deal with it now. 3, our kids aren't going to come out in the numbers. There will be kids who you've seen in Valley View blue and white playing in other colors on Friday nights next year. I know it for a fact. If we care about the numbers of our program, if we care about the community support, and if we care about the quality of the program that we put out there, and we do want our kids to have a great program, then we need to ask ourselves, did we do the right thing, and when should we fix it? Why the action? Already talked about that. My resolution directs the superintendent to solicit applications immediately for an individual to serve as head varsity football coach for the 2022 season. That's what we want to happen. That's what I want to happen. Then I put in my resolution a procedure. I'm open to thoughts of other people on amending to address this issue tonight. The procedure instructs the superintendent to form a committee consisting of himself, the athletic director, 3 representatives chosen by the Valley View Athletic Boosters, and 2 members of the Board of Education selected by a majority vote of the board. I think that's a fair representation of the people who have buy-in in this community and who would give this community the voice that they did not get last spring. That's why the procedure. I didn't just make that up. I didn't just wake up and say, we'll write down some things. That's why that's there. That's a 7-person board with the proper stakeholders to get the way in. The way this resolution is drafted is that following solicitation of applications and candidate interviews at the committee's discretion, the committee shall select 1 candidate at a time by majority vote of the committee to present to the Board of Education for approval until a majority vote of the Board of Education results in the selection of a candidate. It ought to be the committee's choice. This shouldn't be present a handful of people to one individual and let that individual present one to the board. We have a a committee of 7 stakeholders who will be perfectly capable of assessing. This isn't about Ken Moyer. If Ken Moyer wanted to submit his application, that committee could consider it just the same as anybody else. But an actual committee of actual stakeholders with actual power to make an actual decision that they present to the actual board. That's the procedure that I have put in here, having thought it through. The procedure set forth in here shall be applied notwithstanding any current Board of Education policy to the contrary, and enactment of this resolution serves to replace any conflicting policy solely for the purpose of the action taken hereunder. That's because I'm a lawyer, right? I'm not aware of this being in violation of any policy, but I can tell you for a fact, Mr. Richards checked with counsel, and counsel said, yep, our policy makes very clear you're allowed to do this. As a matter of fact, our policy could be changed if we wanted to, suspended it for the purpose of doing this. That's the law. So do we have the canon? Why the action? I told you. Why the procedure? Because it gives the power to the stakeholders in the community. Why the qualifications? The next portion of this resolution, as I've drafted it, and you might be asking, why did you draft the resolution? Because when you put things in writing, there's no wiggle room. The directives are clear. The expectations are clear. The timing is clear. Here's what I put in terms of the qualifications. Because a board has the authority to determine what qualifications it's looking for in a coach. So we put this. When I say we, I mean me. I'm asking the board to approve it. The following characteristics shall be considered favorably. Status as a Valley View graduate. Doesn't mean you have to be a Valley View graduate, but it would help. It would help to be part of this program, to know this program, to know this community, to know the expectations, to love the things in this community that the people in this community love. Doesn't sound like a bad idea. I can't imagine striking that as a favorable, not a mandatory, but a favorable qualification. Second, at least 10 years experience as a high school football coach. We want someone who has experience. We had some great people coaching this year, but so many of them were inexperienced. Our head football coach was not able to deliver a team of coaches like what this community expects. For whatever reason. We want someone with 10 years of head coaching experience, so I put that as a second qualification, because how could you not do that favorably? 3, experience at the varsity level as a football head coach or coordinator at Valley View. I think that's something that we ought to look to and say, yeah, that person who's been able to stand the test of time here, if such a person were to apply, or if such people were to apply, why would we not want that? Someone that Bob Skidmore said, yeah, I want this person as my coordinator, or maybe that someone that Bob Skidmore served under, as that person was a head coach. If such people applied, why would we not want that? I think that's a favorable qualification. I can't imagine striking that. 4, experience as a varsity head coach of any major sport at Valley View. Not mandatory, but if you've coached other sports here and you've been a head coach, I can't see how that would be a bad thing. As a qualification, 1 to consider. And 5, demonstrated community support for that applicant. It matters what you think. It appeared before that it didn't matter what you think. It should. I hope the board understands that it should matter what you think. I closed that qualification section by writing, while these factors are not exhaustive, you can think of other factors. Maybe they played in the NFL. Maybe they played in college. Maybe they coached in the NFL. Maybe Bill Belichick wants the job. You can think of Patriots fans. She's from Maine. She's not a Maine fan. You can think of other factors. The way this is written, other factors might be qualifications that this committee, this very specific committee, would be able to consider. This doesn't tie their hands, but it tells them as a board, being the reflection of the community, these 5 things, these are important. Keep those in mind. We want someone that knows this community. These things should be weighed heavily by the committee in selecting an applicant to present to the Board of Education. I talked about why the action. I talked about why the procedure. I talked about why the qualifications that I've enumerated. And if the board has other ideas, I'd love to hear them. Now, why the timing?
Because the last section of this says this. The superintendent is instructed to ensure that the deadline for applications is set for Friday, January 21st, 2022. That's the better part of 2 weeks. The committee shall work expeditiously to interview selected candidates and notify the Board of Education of its first proposed candidate no later than noon on Monday, January 31st. That's 10 days. 2 weeks, better part, to get applications in. Trust me, they'll be in the mail tomorrow, and it'll be more than 10, and we'll have more than just one active head coach applying for the job. It gives 10 days for the committee to look at who we got, and the committee to sit down and say, who do we want to talk to? Who do we want to ask questions to, and make a recommendation? That's plenty of time, but time is of the essence. What we don't understand is that football season doesn't start the 3rd week of August. Football season started a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Time's wasted. If we don't do this now, and there's no reason not to do it now. Any delay for the sake of delay is nothing more than that. If we don't do this now, we're gonna be having the same conversation next month. And if we decide to punt for a year, we're gonna be having the same conversation next year. I don't wanna talk about football ever again. I wanna move on. This community wants to move on. I don't see any way forward other than moving on. And sometimes it means taking action. So I'm asking the board to approve my resolution exactly as it's written. I don't have anything else to say. Any other comments?
Comment that I have is the number 1 status as Valley View graduate. J.D. Nysauer was not a Valley View graduate. Our beloved Bob Skidmore, which by the way, you don't get him back. He's needed you. Okay. He did not graduate from Valley View. Steve Dixon did not graduate from Valley View. Matt King did not graduate from Valley View. So I think for us to put forth in black and white, which potentially could exclude a wonderful coach that maybe hasn't come from Valley View, didn't graduate from Valley View. Is being a little bit short-sighted.
I would agree, and I also think that being a teacher here would be very valuable.
In response to that, I would say that I drafted this very carefully to not make those, and I hope they're not being interpreted as mandatory characteristics. These are things that would be viewed favorably, and if we could clarify that, I'd be happy to do that. I would accept it as a friendly motion if you wanted to suggest that we add teacher as a favorable characteristic.
And what else did you say?
I don't think
It doesn't have to be a value graduate, it could be.
And I know you said the word favorably, but some people will take that and look at that and they're gonna try to check mark it. And just because you're a Valley View grad does not necessarily mean that you will be the best fit.
That is absolutely true.
Take that one out of there and leave everything else.
I have an idea. I have an idea that someone make a motion that we strike the entire second paragraph because I trust the committee to do its job. Just get rid of it. Everything about those list of qualifications, the committee knows what we need. The people that will be vested with this decision understand how to do it. I would be fine if someone wanted to make a motion to strike that entire second paragraph and get the list of enumerated qualifications out of there because I trust our people. Someone want to make that motion? I will make that motion. Does someone want to second it?
Since it's your motion, I'll second it.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, so a motion to amend a motion on the table, which is what this would do, takes precedence and has to be discussed and then voted on, as I said, in parliamentary procedure this morning. So, the question is, we have a motion, a second, to strike the second paragraph of the resolution, which just would leave the action and the procedure, get rid of the qualifications, and then leave the timing.
Any discussion on that? Do you understand parliamentary procedure? I think because it was my motion to amend my own motion, we don't have to vote on that, do we?
I don't think so. And it was the same, Mr. Skidmore did the second as well.
Cool, all right, we won't even vote on that. All right, so what's now before the board is my resolution as drafted, paragraphs 1 and paragraph 2. Do we have any discussion further on whether to approve that resolution striking the provision listing the enumerated qualifications?
So I can tell you, I've had numerous people reach out to me either through text message or phone calls, letting me know their concerns if Coach Moyer was to stay in position this next year. Several students said that they would not continue in football. And they gave really articulate answers. I was really impressed. It wasn't, oh, I just don't like him, or he didn't play me enough. They gave really good comments as to why. I know Drew touched on some of those, and I really appreciate people calling me and texting me. As a board member, you know, I want to hear from you. I want to know what your thoughts are. I don't take lightly ousting somebody, okay? I'm sure Coach Moyer loves football. I've never met the man. I don't know him. It's nothing personal. But I was elected to represent my community, and the overwhelming majority of people who reached out to me said, we don't want him here because we do not feel like he listened. He didn't seem to care. When we asked a question, he wouldn't answer. We didn't feel like we were prepared, whether it was scouting reports or whatever the case may be. They didn't feel like this program this year was what they needed. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out to me. Just because I'm a female does not mean I don't know football. I do. Ask my husband. Ask Ruth. Since 1976, I love football. Okay. I like academics more. I will let you know that. But I love football.
Any further discussion?
I said at the beginning I might have a potential amendment.
Yes.
I've served on a committee similar to this before, and I've been interviewed by committees like this before. And in all those times, there was only once where the superintendent himself was on the committee. So my motion to amend is in the line where it says the superintendent shall form a committee consisting of himself. I would cross out himself and instead put in the high school principal.
Are you making a motion to that effect?
I thought I said that already.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to you as close as I should have. I was writing. Do we have a second to that motion?
That's something.
Discussion? I'll discuss if no one else will. I would refer to Bob. Bob's been interviewed by these committees. I have not served on one, and so I trust Bob. Any more discussion? All right, let's call the roll.
Mr. Skidmore?
This is on the amendment
Correct.
to the resolution.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. DeGrove?
Same.
Mrs. Iser?
No.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes. Any further discussion on the resolution as now twice amended? I think we can call the roll.
Sorry. Mr. Rudd?
Yes.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes.
Mr. DeGrove?
No.
Mrs. Iser?
No.
And Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Takes care of Roman numeral 8F. Roman numeral 9, superintendent's comments.
Yep, here we go. I'll try to be brief now. As we move forward, and I told the board that we were going to be talking about this, when we have a little bit of work with committees coming up. We do have a policy committee. That was something I instituted because they are the board's policies. They are not my policies. And so I think it's helpful to see two board members on a policy committee. it's a little dry unless you really, really like policy. They will give you the whole ins and outs of why those policies are being looked at. But our first one is going to be coming up here, well, next week. So are there 2 board members? We haven't ever done it in a formalized vote, just looking for, I think we've seen earlier, getting volunteers is fine. Sure. Then you guys can thumb wrestle or whatever if there's multiple people that want to do it. But are there 2 people, so that way we don't accidentally have 4 people show up for a policy committee and then we have problems.
Right, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I would love to do it, I'm not against doing it. But I don't wanna waste the opportunity. I know next week we have a meeting, unfortunately, I'm out of state for work, and so how often, like, will there be other times to weigh in on policy?
So what we've historically done is we've had, and you're not required to do this, when we do policy readings, they're typically a first reading and a second reading. So one of the advantages of having 2 board members that can be part of the committee listening to Neola is that when we go to adopt those policies, those 2 board members can share with the other 3 board members, this is why they're doing it. Because some of those policies look really weird, like what was it, a few years ago, we actually had to create a drone policy. It's not something that most people think about, you'd have a drone policy. So typically, on a normal year, it's 2 times a year that we meet. It could be, maybe it's 3, but it's typically 2 times. Neola typically does 2 updates a year.
We have volunteers?
Don't everybody volunteer at once.
I will gladly volunteer with the understanding I won't be there next week.
Okay.
What is the timing of this meeting?
The one next week, we already have on the books for 10 a.m.
And it's on the 18th.
That is the 19th, Wednesday the 19th.
Anyone else? Ben, you're gonna be lonely in a meeting with none of us.
I have the same issue, I can't be there next week, but I can do it.
Well, if that's the case, then maybe we need to postpone it.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think then we need to postpone it. Because I really do think it's beneficial. It's the board's policies. My job is just to enact them. It's better if the board fully understands.
And they've been virtual.
Yeah, they are virtual.
Virtual.
Yeah. I got a meeting.
Okay, but I'm just saying though, for future
So
safety.
if we pick who the people are, I will say, I think Norm, who's the Neola representative, can meet during the day. So who the 2 people are that are on the committee, if you can just give me the dates and times that you are available during the day, then I can go back to Norm and try to find a date that works.
That'd be good. So,
So who are the 2 people that want to do it again?
I think it's Mr. Skidmore and myself.
Additionally, and I'm kind of speaking out of place because this is a little bit more Ms. Aubers. One of the other things that we have is a finance committee that we've historically had where we have 2 board members on. Are there 2 board members, that's technically considered a superintendent committee, even though she's the one leading it. Are there 2 board members that would like to be a part of the finance committee? So that way we don't have to go back around, and we need to have a meeting, and try to figure out who wants to be on it.
Sure.
Okay. Anybody else?
How often will the finance committee meet?
As needed, it's been a while because of COVID. We did try to have a virtual meeting during COVID, it didn't go so well. We typically have met before board meetings, so if we have a 6 o'clock start, we'll do like a 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock start time. If they're virtual, we maybe would pick a different
That's a
night.
couple times a year.
Yeah, a couple times a year.
If someone really wants to do it, you can, but if not, I'll be the second.
I don't want this.
And then the last one for me to talk about, and I know we're going to be talking about other committees, I think, at some point in time, but with talking about the building project, whether we'd like to have, I actually think it would be beneficial if we had 2 board members on that committee, just to be able to listen to some of the conversations, if for no other reason than to be able to hear some of the feedback, so that we could have a better communication loop with what we're doing. I think it would be beneficial. The previous board talked about committees, and that was one that even the previous board said, maybe we should really have that one. I know we're probably at some point in time, not today, we're talking about that, but If the board wanted to have that, I'd be welcome to having two board members on that committee. To give you the dates where they're meeting. We just can't have 4 people show up at the same time, so.
Maybe shoot us an email with other dates so that we can just do.
Yeah, so here's what I can give you, the dates, already. We have sent out invitations for, it'll be 6 to 8 p.m., January 20th, January 27th, January 31st, and then if needed, February 10th and February 24th. So, I just want to make certain that we don't have people showing up and I have to tell you guys to go home. That's not a great situation. So, are there 2 people who want to do that? I'm sure everybody does. Let me rephrase that. I'm sure a lot of people would, but I'm just looking for who that would be.
Those dates again.
Yep, not a problem. It is January 20th, 27th, the 31st, and then February 10th and February 24th, if needed.
Maybe we think about it.
Okay, that's fine. Tell you what, can we do this? If you look back at those dates and they're of interest, email me. If we have less than 3, we don't have a problem. If it's more than 3, then you guys can thumb wrestle with each other and sort of do that.
We can sort that out.
Yep.
Any other superintendent comments?
No, other than I'm super happy with, thanks to the students and staff, really this past, right before break and now, it has been, as we said, I think we've beaten it into the ground. It's been a difficult time right now, and I appreciate your flexibility and willingness to try different things as we move forward. Our goal is to keep kids in school as much as humanly possible. That's always what we want to do, but when you look at those numbers around the world, we are not immune to everything else. So thank you to all the people that have pitched in to do amazing things. Thank you all.
One item, and I'll ask our resident parliamentarian down at the end. One item in execution of the resolution that we just passed is that the board needs to select 2 people to serve on that committee. I think that selection has to be public.
Okay.
And so procedurally, I think we need to act upon that. And so do we have any volunteers to serve on the committee for the search for the varsity football coach?
I will volunteer.
I will volunteer if no one else wants it. If anybody else wants it, I might still volunteer. We got 2 volunteers and that's it. I don't know if we need to vote, so. We have 2 volunteers. Board member comments. I never remember what order we go in, but I always like to hear from those 2 first. Typically, are the best comments.
So from a student perspective, a lot of sports are picking up again with indoor track, basketball, the musicals going on. Really after tonight, I really don't have as much to add as usual, just because I just want to wish the student board members good luck and thank you for what you've done so far. I think we're off to a great start.
Yeah, really there's not a whole lot of new updates other than I do think it's worth mentioning that Claire Henson over the weekend in her basketball game against Brookville, she scored her 1,000th point. So congrats to Claire on that, that's awesome. Very impressive. Also, me and Sophia are currently on Sophia and I are currently on
Thank you very much.
on the roundtable of student reps from other districts, and I'm not entirely sure if it's like a hard, fast rule, but I'm pretty sure that they really encourage an official board member to be present with us in those meetings. They're all virtual.
They
And
can send a text tonight.
yes, and those occur no more than once a month typically, and it's a really good
Sometimes
opportunity.
even more. We had, our last meeting was about 2 months ago.
Yeah, we haven't met in a little while. But our next meeting is January 22nd. It's always on a Saturday at around 11 o'clock. So if anybody on this board would be willing to do that for us, that would be greatly appreciated.
So the purpose of the committee is we come up with topics to present to state officials that hopefully can be spread around the state. For example, last year we spoke with different state legislatures on the issues of state testing, and we did several surveys around the school, and I believe that survey was actually taken to Columbus.
I do want to say that I'm really pleased with how much, I know this was a pretty long meeting, but I am very pleased with the amount of public participation we've had, not like public participation, but like participation throughout the meeting. I never really understood why the public was so little involved during these meetings when we could like answer questions that we know the answers to right then and there, just all the problems or issues that or concerns that people have. So I really appreciate that and the reliance that we have on the community because again, we work for the community. And so it's always a good thing to have. And I'm really pleased with that dedication that we have so far. Finally, I think that today we took a step forward in healing the community. The Valley View Board of Education hurt the community back in, what was that, February and March. We have been hurting since. We have been hurting from that. Football is a big part of student life here at Valley View. And whether you're on the team or not, it is a big part of student life. I can imagine how a senior football player would have felt this year going through the season that we had. I feel robbed and I was not on the team. It was very frustrating to go through. We made the best of it, but it did not have to happen the way that it did. And so it was wrong when it happened. It was wrong during the season. It's wrong now and it will be wrong forever. But today we took the first step in correcting that wrong. And I'm very appreciative of that because we have been hurting. We can heal from it, but there will always be that scar. And so it's I'm very grateful that this board has started to take the steps to correct the wrongs that this previous board made. And so that's all that I have for today.
Comments? Spencer?
Oh, just thank you to everybody who's here tonight and participated virtually, and just take care of each other and yourselves during this time. There's a lot of stuff going around right now, and people are getting really sick. Please be careful.
I have nothing.
I just wanted to say quickly, Valley View's Ladies Spartan sports programs have had tremendous success and tradition over the years. The girls put in tremendous effort and they deserve the best. Currently, we are in the process of finding a new soccer coach. I hope that we are doing everything that we possibly can to find a quality coach who can bring some stability back to the program because they've been through a number of coaches. So I hope that we are actively working with college teams, seeing if they have players that want to coach, calling up other high schools that have good programs, seeing if they have former players who want to coach. I hope that we are really pursuing and trying to find the best possible coach because they deserve it.
Bob, Tim, and I spent this last weekend in a board training, new board training, both days, all day. It's just the beginning of the amount of information that we're gonna have to learn. I had really no idea just how much board members need to know from the legal perspective, policy, et cetera, et cetera. I think we represented pretty well. And, but anyways, I learned a bunch, and I'm thankful that the school sent us to that conference. And I want to thank the teachers, coaches, students, everybody who's just trying to muddle through this year. It's a tough year. And I don't know what it's like in the education arena. I only know what it's like in the hospital arena, and tough there too. But I don't think the teachers get enough thanks. I don't think the bus drivers get enough thanks, janitors, and all of the other people who help to keep the school running. Thank you. It's not been fun, and hopefully we'll get through it soon.
I'll close with comments. First of all, I want to thank all of our speakers. Ms. Gilbert listened to every word that you said. I had no idea about most of that kind of learning because I'm not a math and science person. I will promise you that I will learn everything I can about what the school ought to be offering on those things, and we'll do our best to bring them to Ms. Sears, love hearing from you. As always, I appreciate your passion. Thank you for coming and sharing with us. Ms. Cordell, thank you for your thoughts. And I think we've all, sometimes the wrestling program, out of sight, out of mind. And historically, the wrestling programs in every school, everywhere, except for Graham, get what's left of the
And St. Ed's. Don't forget St. Ed's up in Cleveland.
Yeah, well, yes, St. Ed's, yeah, they don't count.
You will.
They're pro. Well, with the public school level, yeah, the wrestling program, they get what's left. And for anybody that heard Bill talk, Bill Miller spoke passionately, spoke from the heart, he spoke truth. And I think I'm a positive person, believe it or not. I love to laugh, I love to smile, I love to enjoy life. Part of what motivated me to get on this board is because I want to see more smiles. And I know that sounds not like something that ought to come from me. I want this community to be happy again. I want this community to be proud again. I want this community to feel listened to again. Drew, I heard what you had to say. I hope we listen to you. Along the lines of what Bob said, and I said it earlier, and I mean it, I don't want us to be the football board. Thank goodness now we're not going to have to be. This is a football community. We like it, kind of, right? Go see your girls' basketball team play. Go see your junior high teams play. Go see your wrestling program play. If we want to improve the morale in this community, just buy an all sports pass. It's cheap. Go to every home thing that you can if you can. I know you've got lives outside of this. Make over the kids that do great things. For example, 1,000 points, holy smokes. That's a lot of points. I mean, that's a big deal. When you see that posted by the Valley View Athletic Department on Facebook, share it, comment about it. We have the capability in this community with all of the resources that we have. We have the ability, no matter what our obstacles, whether it's the building, whether it's athletics, whether it's academics, no matter what it is, we have the resources, the brain power and manpower, woman power, person power. We have the people that we can make whatever we want of the future of this district. And I hope that every one of us goes into this community and does what they can to lift everybody else up, because I think we can do that. And I know it seems like that's not a school board issue. That is very much a school board issue. Because how Valley View Local Schools goes, so goes Farmersville, so goes Germantown, so goes the townships. And so I think we're onto something great. Last thing I want to say, I've never met Mr. McKee, but the one thing that I hear when I talk to people in the community, everybody tells me that Mr. McKee is awesome. I don't know how to quantify that. But the kids really seem to love you. And so, not to put you on the spot. I mean, you might give a seminar on how to be awesome. But from what I hear, you're engaged and you're personable, and I've not heard a single thing. For people to go out of their way to tell me positive things, that means something's going on. So since you happen to be here, I had to hear it, I've never met you before in my life. I'm glad you're here, and I really do. I'm thankful for what we have in this community. Any other comments? All right, so
The same thing.
with that, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn so I can use this gavel? Is there a second? Roll call?
Mr. DeGrove?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Iser?
Yes.
Mr. Rudd?
Yes.